Oh,
Hey guys,
can't
I'm
we
just
though?
getting this all set up, and this is Nurse Mark and the
Hey, hey.
Green Nurse Podcast. We
Woo!
are here. What are we here for? To bring hope,
Inspiration,
inspiration, growth,
growth,
and
and
healing,
healing.
right? Mark and I like to talk about things that people don't like to talk about. And the reason why it is important to talk about things is to decrease stigma around these issues for healing.
Yes, yes,
It's as
yes.
simple as that.
It is.
So tonight's topic, men, women, irritable bowel, and cannabis. And, no one wants to talk about poop. Mark and
We're
I
going
were
to talk about poop. Sherri and I were talking before we got on this thing. You know what? It's a topic of conversation with every nurse. We all talk about poop. Every shift change, what do we talk about with the patients?
Did the
Did they
patient
poop?
pass gas? Did they move their bowels? The color, the
Yeah,
consistency? Did you dip it for blood? Guaiac?
right.
Seriously, like this is
Listen, it's important. We have to know these things because it's absolutely directly related to your health. And if you're in the hospital and you're not pooping, you ain't leaving.
and and part of my story, like for people that are out there,
Mm.
literally it is. I can make fun of it now, but at the time I was sick and suffering.
Oh, you weren't. Yeah.
I had pseudomembranous C. diff colitis, which
Mhm.
landed me in the emergency room, the intensive care unit with megacolon. And that disease
So
almost
what's
killed me.
megacolon?
Megacolon is when your colon it gets
People
bigger
don't
and
know.
bigger and
Yeah.
bigger and bigger because things were not moving through my colon. The bacteria in my gut started to expand, and these spores were replicating so fast in my intestinal tract that it completely wreaked havoc on all of the good
It's a
bacteria.
deadly thing.
I almost
Condition
lost
for
my
sure.
intestine. They
Yeah.
pretty much told my mother, we don't know if she's gonna make it. And just to think of
Legit.
dying of C. diff, no thank you. I mean, seriously,
Yeah.
you know, but
Yeah. Yeah.
it's the reality is there. And so, cannabis saved my life. Cannabis and multiple other healing tools saved my life. So it's just interesting how I think this conversation is important because no one wants to talk about it. It was probably the most embarrassing thing that I have ever
Oh.
had to experience in my entire life.
And you know what? And the funniest part of that is, Sherri, everybody does it. They have to do it to continue to survive. Because if you don't, you'll die. It's just like that. If you get an obstruction, you're dead if it doesn't get cleared.
Yeah,
And yet we find that we can't talk about it.
well, it's just interesting too because of social taboos, gender
Uh-huh.
expectations, which dictate what women, should be
Yeah.
doing and shouldn't be doing in regards and secretive about the bowel function. This can
Hmm.
cause isolation. Like my mother, sorry, mom, I'm gonna rat you out. She told me that she never farted. Okay, and I mean, can you imagine? How
I,
many times we fart a day? Like seriously?
yeah. Yeah.
So for me to
It's a
think
large
that.
number. It's a very large number, Sherri.
So even just the whole taboo around
Yeah.
excretion and
Right.
smell, and it's a horrifying thing. And I'm telling you, it was something that I had to look in the face.
Now, see,
Chronic.
that's a funny thing because there's a difference between guys and girls with that. Because guys, farting is like it's a thing that you do. You
All the time.
all the time around all your buddies. You catch them in a small room. It's the best. I mean, like we're encouraged to actually embrace our gas, right?
And
So
embrace our farts.
and yeah, really embrace our farts. And women are like, no, not allowed.
I
Women,
mean,
I've dated women that absolutely, for a number of years, they never, ever, ever pass gas in front of me.
I
I don't know
could
if they,
I can identify like I just the embarrassment and just like it was just so embarrassing at the time, really, really horrifying. Like I could talk
yeah.
about anything, but just like, chronic nausea, vomiting, diarrhea, incontinence, right? All of that, not being able to leave the home, not knowing what's going to
Right.
happen
For
when you
you, with
eat.
everything that was going on, all of those things.
It was
Yeah.
horrible. It was just completely mental, emotional, spiritual
Hmm.
drain, you know what I mean?
Hmm.
And not
Yeah.
being able to take care of yourself feed yourself and then take care of your children. So it was horrible. So irritable bowel. So basically cannabis saved my life, plus other health and wellness tools. I'm not on any medications. I have a perfectly healthy diet, but I do have to watch what I eat. So let's talk about, do I still have irritable bowel? Yeah, I do. But it's a diagnosis that isn't active. It's on my diagnoses. Colitis, pseudomembranous C. diff, colitis, irritable bowel. But I'm not living the story of irritable bowel because I take care of myself. So we're going to talk about what is irritable bowel disease versus irritable bowel syndrome.
And I have been, years ago, I was diagnosed with IBS. And it's sort of it's a checkbox that says, we really don't know what's causing it. We don't know why you have these issues, but this is what you have. Check.
So basically, and we're going to get into that in a little bit too, because Ethan Russo is a doctor who actually, I might just bring that up right now, right? Which is really cool. I wrote this all down. So Ethan Russo in 2016 wrote an article confirming studies that he did in 2001 and 2004. So it was the study was called The Clinical Endocannabinoid Deficiency Reconsidered. Current research supports the theory in migraine, fibromyalgia, and irritable bowel, and other treatment-resistant syndromes, meaning that these patients with these diagnoses have a clinical endocannabinoid deficiency, and they all have particular unifying pathophysiology things that are present. For example, all three of the conditions manifest in hyperalgesia states with pain, and they're clinically diagnosed based on subjective criteria. And then they can't find objective criteria. They can't find objective information to quantify it to make a specific diagnosis.
Right.
All are diagnoses of exclusion, meaning that they, go through multiple
rule
tests.
out everything else one by one until they get to this point where they just have ruled everything that they know out as the cause, right?
And then the interesting thing too is that, all of these conditions also have an incidence, a comorbidity of anxiety and depression, right? It's the chicken and the egg dilemma. So they've been labeled as psychosomatic, right? And so, these diagnoses, these patients, that's what this whole medical trauma, they don't believe me, what's going on. And so if doctors had an understanding of the clinical, of the endocannabinoid system, just how much better it would be for patients. When patients come to me and say they don't know what's wrong with me, they have no idea, they don't know, I go, that's good news to me.
That is good news.
Because that intuitively tells me that there's something bigger that's missing. And it's not a pill. It's not a drug. It's not a surgery. You're not
deficient in antacids, right? It's just there's something else amiss. Yeah.
Exactly. So irritable bowel and irritable bowel syndrome. So this is interesting. This is pretty cool because we kind of lump everything into, gut. So the irritable bowel disease is a structural issue, right? So it's such as ulcerative colitis and Crohn's disease. Right? And then the irritable bowel syndrome is a functional disease. So it means that and what it means too is the contents of your large intestines either move too quickly or too slowly. And tests generally don't show any reason why you have those symptoms. So gender differences, Mark.
Oh.
Who gets the raw end of the deal?
Oh, girls, you get the raw end of this deal yet again. Yeah, more prevalent in women. Very much so. I can tell you, I probably have a half a dozen or more women in my life, family members and very close friends that suffer from colitis, Crohn's disease, irritable bowel syndrome. Absolutely. The IBS, many, many, many more, but IBD, definitely at least a half a dozen people very close to me, all female. Wow.
So the interesting thing is to why women, so what the research has shown that women with irritable bowel symptoms generally change during the various stages of their menstrual cycle. So, with irritable bowel syndrome, people have either diarrhea or constipation or bloating or gas or a combination of different things. You know what I mean? Digestive problems, just a lot of different symptoms. But for women, it can change and fluctuate depending on the type during the what phase of your menstrual cycle you're in. So during the menstrual cycle, women create more, some women, not all women, create more prostaglandins. And what they do is they cause the uterus to contract. So you can get, move the bloodstream, move the blood out, right? And so what happens is if there's too many of these prostaglandins that are contracting the uterus, they can travel in the bloodstream and go to the bowel, right? And then they cause the bowel to contract and to cramp. And then that's when diarrhea happens, right? So research has shown that non-steroidals can help. Well, guess what? Cannabinoids can help as well.
Yes.
Right? So also with women, 2 weeks before menstruation, right, there's an increase in progesterone, and that relaxes the smooth muscle, right? And so what happens is if you relax the smooth muscle, it can slow down motility in our gut, which can increase the transit time, which means that the food's taken forever to get out, and that can cause constipation.
Yeah.
Right. So irritable bowel with constipation is also more prevalent in women than men. And they basically said that the sex hormones and gender differences play a huge role in the pathophysiology, which I find is fascinating.
Yeah. And it's unfortunate, but you're right. I think the sex hormones have a lot to do with it. And, my anecdotal experience is that women suffer much more from constipation than men do, at least from, again, my anecdotal experience.
Yeah. No. Just let that shit go.
It's not that easy, right? You got to, so we'll talk about, some things that
talk about some strategies. Absolutely.
Yeah, and cannabis is definitely in the mix for sure.
Right. So the part that's cool is the endocannabinoid system. So why does cannabis work on our digestive tract? Well, it's because we have an endocannabinoid system. And if you heard Mark and I talk, this is why we have it's right over there, that little umbrella.
Yeah.
So my umbrella concept of explaining the endocannabinoid system. Imagine that, right? It just makes sense because it's such an abstract concept. And just imagining that we are an umbrella, and at the top of the umbrella is the endocannabinoid system, and all the spokes of the umbrella are all of the different organ systems that make up our body and our immune system. And the fabric that connects the spokes to the umbrella are the neurotransmitter signaling systems that give messages to different areas of our body, or the spokes of the umbrella, to tell our body to do something or stop doing something. Very tippy top of the umbrella is the endocannabinoid system. We make cannabinoids. They're called internal endogenous cannabinoids, very similar to the plant, upon demand, to shower on our umbrella, right?
Right.
You want to get rained on. And
they get rained on and then they dissipate. The body just naturally processes them and they're gone.
Yes. And so the goal of
their job.
They do the job is to keep the umbrella going up and down nicely, homeostasis or balance. So if we're not making enough of our own, we can have
there are a lot of things that affect that.
Correct.
Right?
Tons of things that can affect endocannabinoid deficiency, ranging from genetics to pharmaceuticals to alcohol consumption to diet,
tobacco,
lack of exercise, not, managing stress, insomnia. So there's a whole host of things that can cause this endocannabinoid deficiency. So anyway, so the endocannabinoid systems works on the gut 3 different ways, 3 major ways. Mark.
Yeah.
Number 1, it works to decrease inflammation, or actually modulates inflammation. I hate to say,
yeah.
So basically it's an immunomodulator. Immune system up, immune system down. So it modulates inflammation. Right. So it
modulates pain.
And it modulates pain. Absolutely. So we've got receptors in our gut, CB1 and CB2 receptors in our gut, which protects our gut, to keep inflammation at bay. The most powerful one that I thought that I had the most, interaction with had to do with regulates digestive action. Right.
Yeah.
So gastric motility, gastric secretions, right? So the endocannabinoid system regulates the gastric action. And so cannabinoids can actually help too. So if people are having a lot of diarrhea, THC is wonderful. THC products are great to help decrease gastric motility.
Right.
CBD is great too for the other things. So a lot of people that are constipated, we have seen using even water soluble CBD. I've seen people have really good, So basically it regulates, it modulates inflammation, regulates digestive action. So motility and secretions, right? And then when we activate these receptors, it calms down calms down the nausea, slows the emptying of the stomach if it needs to, reduces the stomach acid and stimulates our appetite.
Right. And this is all the endocannabinoid system.
All of it.
In play. Whether it's, again, it's endo, it's internal, it's our own system. So we're creating these cannabinoids that are going to or we're creating these chemicals that mimic cannabinoids.
Yes.
So
yes.
And that's how our body regulates all of this. Yeah.
Yes.
Fascinating stuff. I love this stuff.
In the communication, and this is like, we keep getting back to the umbrella. So right now we're talking about one spoke of the umbrella. We're talking about, the digestive system. Now, the part that's cool too is we're going to see how the interconnectedness of the endocannabinoid system, because of the third thing that it does, that the endocannabinoid system does with the gut, is that it regulates communication between the gut and the brain. This blew my mind away. So basically we have our central nervous system, right?
Yeah.
And we have our enteric nervous system. Our enteric nervous system is the nervous system that runs parallel to our central nervous system, which is put side by side. The enteral nervous system runs from our esophagus all the way to our rectum and our vagus nerve, Mark.
Right. Yeah.
Right.
The vagus nerve, right? Parasympathetic, sympathetic nervous system. So that vagus nerve is extremely involved in almost all of the interactions with the gut and many other things. So it's huge. And so here you have those two nervous systems, and the endocannabinoid system signaling
allows them to communicate.
Yeah.
Okay.
Remember how you remember the saying, you better trust your gut instinct. That's what it's talking about. It's literally your gut is part of your brain. Like it's you, when you should trust your gut, you really should trust your gut, because it's getting signals that we're not seeing with our other five senses. So that it's amazing.
So I do love that. It's like, your gut, your enteric nervous system, central nervous system uses the same receptors, neurons, and neurotransmitters. They speak the same language, and it is the endocannabinoid system that allows that to happen. So it just makes sense when we have brain changes such as stress or pain that can alter.
Reflected in your gut.
Exactly. Right.
When you get nervous before you start to do a podcast, you get that funny feeling in your gut. You get You get those butterflies, or let's take it when somebody does public speaking. Every time I get up and start to do something, I'm nervous, and I feel it in my gut, because it's that connection. Yeah.
Absolutely. So the other thing too, so if you think about this, so improved bowel health improves brain health. And there's this whole concept of nutritional psychiatry. And that's some of the things that we're going to talk about next, is how do we support our endocannabinoid system for a healthy gut? Right. We know the big things to avoid. It's my favorite list.
We do.
You ready?
It's all the things that, we've been bred to eat, right? It's the things we've been trained to eat in our society for the last 50 years anyway, right?
Fast food,
parents didn't eat.
Fake food.
My grandparents grew up, right? Cooking their own food.
Cooking their own meals, not eating out of a can or a box.
Right. But they transitioned to that because it got to be easier, right? So it becomes a convenience thing. But you're right. So what are the things? What are you going to avoid?
So it's interesting. We want to avoid, and this is very interesting too. So before, I have to just bring up history a little bit, because it just fascinates me. So you just think about how we had hemp in our diets before the Marijuana Tax Act, right? And so just think about at that time, what happened, right? Alcohol prohibition ended, right? The food industry started using more additives and chemicals, right?
Listen,
and then the pharmaceutical
so chemistry
industry
has a lot to do with it, right? Yeah, food, in how our food is manufactured. If there's a less expensive way. That's what high fructose corn syrup is about. It's a less expensive method to make things sweet. So they use high fructose corn syrup to sweeten their products. The only problem is it's very, very bad for us. It's not good for us at all.
So the fast food, fried food, fake food, artificial flavors, artificial colorings, trans fat, hydrogenated oils, high fructose corn syrup, and processed sugar, bad for the gut.
Bad.
What's good for the gut? There's so many good things. There's so many good things. We have a huge list. Right, Mark?
Tons of stuff.
So the number one thing I would have to say, even for me with my gut, is consuming foods that are rich in cannabinoids, right? From cannabis and hemp. So eating infused foods, like infusing the butters, the oils, the olive oil, the coconut oil, the MCT oil, and incorporating various cannabinoids in my diet is how I have felt that has helped me the most. And then you can get various cannabis, and then there's other hemp products, hemp food, hemp protein, hemp milk.
Yep.
Right?
Yeah.
Hemp protein bars.
Hemp protein's a great protein. Absolutely. Has all the amino acids. It's a fabulous profile.
It is a fabulous profile. And then the various cannabinoids and terpenes that are gut promoting. And we all know about THC, we all know about CBD, but there's some of the other minor cannabinoids that are very healthy for the gut. Mark was just talking about THCA.
Yeah. So you have it on the list here, juicing raw cannabis. So if you're in a state that allows you to grow cannabis, if you're in a rec state and they have a certain amount that you can grow, or if you're a medicinal patient and you can grow it, you can juice it. And THC, before it becomes THC via decarboxylation, which means it gets heated up, right? A raw cannabis plant, you can't get high off of it because the THC is not there. What's there, however, is the precursor chemical, which is THCA in its acidic form. Well, THCA is 10 times more potent as an anti-inflammatory than CBD. And CBD has great anti-inflammatory properties. THCA is 10 times more potent. In other words, if you use that and juice it, you're going to have a much greater effect in decreasing your inflammation in your body. It's really super, super powerful. The issue is it's not that easy of a chemical to work with during the extraction process. It's a kind of a volatile chemical, and it's not easy to extract. So that's why
you don't want to heat it up, because you want to make sure
you don't want to heat it up. Whatever you do, don't heat it up, because that's when you have THC and you're going to be a little bit high.
Yes. And so there was a story, Mark, about a father who actually grew cannabis for his twins who both had Crohn's disease. And these were young girls, and their Crohn's disease went into full remission from just juicing cannabis. So I found that to be very fascinating. And then the other cannabinoids too, CBG is the mother of all cannabinoids. It's before THC and CBD even get formed.
CBD comes from, it's like the stem cell.
The mother.
It's the mother. Everything springs from the mother.
And I found CBG to be really, really beneficial in specifically working on the CB2 receptors in the gut and our immune system. I don't use it all the time, but if I feel like I'm coming into a flare, I generally pick up that product and use it for a month. CBG has been really, really helpful in calming the gastrointestinal system from inflammation. It does something a little bit different than THC. I'm not as impaired when I take it. So CBG is a non-impairing cannabinoid. And so I could tolerate higher doses of that in the daytime, so I wouldn't be impaired. CBG is wonderful. And I've also seen a lot of patients with gastric cancer and abdominal cancers use CBG in conjunction with small amounts of THC and CBD, and have had really good results in managing symptoms, which has been great. And then beta caryophyllene is a terpene that acts as a cannabinoid. But the beta caryophyllene, I just think is fascinating because it can be found in herbs and spices. Okay.
Yeah.
So you can add
terpenes are in many, many, many plants. And we've been consuming terpenes forever.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And beta caryophyllene is not only a terpene, but it acts as a cannabinoid, specifically in our gut receptors, which I like.
Yeah.
Yep. And here's the difference. Okay, so just if you guys have gut issues and you want to think of some things to cook and use and spices, just think of this: black pepper, clove, cinnamon, oregano, basil, lavender, rosemary are all rich in the terpenes and phytocannabinoid beta caryophyllene.
Yeah.
I really, really, I love that. And when I'm looking at labs of CBD profiles, I'm always looking to see.
You're looking for that. Yeah, I read a study where they were studying the entourage effect, because we still don't really know why cannabis is so powerful when it's in combination with everything that's in the plant. It's called the entourage effect. We really still don't really know why, but research is ongoing. And one of the things that they did find was that the only terpene that showed any sort of cannabinoid-like effect in the body that they could really see during the studies was beta caryophyllene.
Wow.
Yeah.
So here's beta caryophyllene is definitely, and I love pepper, and cinnamon and all of those other things. And then the other thing too is supplements, adaptogens, Ayurvedic herbs, and fungus. All of those different mushrooms that
fungi.
exist.
Oh my gosh. Oh, have you seen, as a side note, when we're talking about that, have you seen the documentary Fantastic Fungi?
No.
Oh my gosh, you got to look it up. I'm telling you, folks, to really watch this thing. It'll blow your mind.
Okay, so fantastic. Okay, so you're gonna have to send me a link.
I will do it. Yeah, it's on Netflix, on Prime. I watched it. I'm gonna watch it again. It was that good that I'm gonna watch it again this week.
Yeah.
Seriously.
Mark sent me an awesome breathwork meditation. So Mark and I are he's totally introducing new things to me. And so I did this 15-minute breathwork meditation. Holy schmoly, Mark, I had to go lay down for it. Totally. It was so interesting, but it was just what I needed, because I needed to unplug.
These are the other things we're talking about, Sherri, that affect the endocannabinoid system.
Yeah.
For sure. This is gonna upregulate and make you a healthier person.
Yep.
Oh, and that cold shower. I always have to mention that.
The cold shower.
Cold immersion.
Cold immersion. I know. Cryotherapy.
Stimulates your endocannabinoid system. Wow.
Totally does. Totally does. And then there's one other thing too that I want to mention for gut health. The probiotic lactobacillus does modulate the endocannabinoid system in the gut. So probiotics are huge. Echinacea is also another one that works on the endocannabinoid system in the gut as well. And then the other thing too is, we all know, to support a healthy gut, right? Sleep hygiene, exercise, all of that other stuff, that mental, emotional, spiritual stuff, meditation, prayer, recreation.
All has an effect. It all has an effect on your health. Really does.
So the endocannabinoid system regulates every single aspect of our bowel. And every level of irritable bowel syndrome, anti-inflammatory signals, serotonin signaling, and maintaining balance of healthy gut bacteria.
And it comes down to that, right? It comes down to healthy gut bacteria, because one of the things that they do now, a standard protocol treatment for what you had was a fecal transplant, right? You need to have that gut biome, right?
Guess what? You guys, y'all want a confession? I'm going to confess here right on Facebook Live. I had a fecal transplant.
And literally, folks, is what they do. They take poop from someone else.
Oh yeah, they took they took a fresh. This is a comedy show in itself. At the time, it's not funny, but I can totally laugh at it now, because I'm sure there's other people that are going through it.
You have to be able to laugh, man.
But I'm telling you, the whole experience was so humbling. It was literally, so I can literally.
But it worked.
But it didn't work all the way. I'm going to tell you, it worked 50%.
Oh, yeah.
What ended up making it work? So the fecal transplant allowed me to come off of heavy doses of antibiotics. I was on 2 grams of vancomycin a day, plus multiple other
If anybody knows anything about vancomycin, it's one of the most caustic antibiotics. It's like a last level antibiotic, because it's so
it's like the vincristine of chemotherapy. Seriously.
Yeah.
It's like, that's like the worst
Yeah.
chemotherapy ever, right? So
It's right. Right.
vancomycin
And
is
that's what
right up
vancomycin
there.
is like that. Yeah.
So on vancomycin for 2 years, and I
Oh
couldn't
my
get off
God.
of it. And so the fecal transplant allowed me to get off of vancomycin. And so my test was negative. However, I still suffered from symptoms, gastrointestinal symptoms. So I had all of the symptoms,
So
but
get
just
this.
didn't
What do you
have the
think
C. diff.
happened? What do you think happened? So
Cannabis
you solved one part of the equation, but your endocannabinoid system was still not
up
repaired.
to par. It was not. And I'm
Yeah.
so lucky. I mean, seriously, because
Yeah.
I was doing, and that was the other thing too. So even though the C. diff was negative and all the tests were negative, I still had every single symptom, and they would vary in degrees. And my life was so unpredictable that affect my
Hmm.
mental health. That's when
Hmm.
we're going to do a show on agoraphobia. I had that too.
Yeah.
Right. So seriously, so it was really, 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 really important
Hmm.
um, to look at everything,
Yeah.
when we're working with patients.
It
And
is.
that was the thing too, is that, part of my story is that if these doctors knew about the endocannabinoid system sooner, I
Hmm.
probably would have not been circling the drain of despair for as long as I did.
For as long as you
Because,
did.
because this is the interesting thing. Prior
Yeah.
to me getting sick, the only thing I had was ADHD and migraine headaches.
Hmm.
Where would the light bulb go off? Migraine headaches.
Yeah.
Okay. So
Yeah.
if a clinician, a doctor, a nurse saw me and every single diagnosis that I was collecting, before you knew it, at the end of 2.5 years, so many diagnoses, if they saw at the beginning, she has migraine headaches, maybe it just would have clicked for them to think that cannabinoids could have been a solution or a supplement or a tool to help make
Hmm.
everything else work.
Yeah.
So truly, having
Well,
information,
what made the difference on the other 50%?
cannabinoids. So
Boom.
it was like, but here, this is the interesting thing. So I had that surgical procedure. It helped me, but I still was sick and suffering. So
Hmm.
the symptoms were still there. I still wasn't absorbing nutrients. I had a difficult time eating. And then what
Hmm.
happened is that's when I developed, my immune system still wasn't great. I developed an autoimmune condition on top of it.
Oh my gosh.
And that's when my mental health, chronic myofascial pain
Hmm.
syndrome, polymyalgia rheumatica. So you can see gut was halfway fixed, but the unfixed gut led
Hmm.
to other autoimmune conditions, chronic pain, circling the
Right.
drain,
So
9 yards.
they put a new gut biome in, really. They
Yes.
augment what you had with somebody else's, and you grew all this new bacteria in your gut, which is the healthy thing to do. Without it, you can't digest food. Uh, and yeah, so here
And
you
then
are. All of
the
these things
cannabis,
added
and
on.
then the cannabis came in and made all the medications work better, which I was able to get off, and then
Hmm.
made all of the other health and wellness tools that I was using work again that didn't work.
Yeah.
Right. So truly. So it was traditional. So initially it was traditional therapy, surgery, and
Hmm.
then cannabis.
Hmm.
And I truly believe that if I had cannabis a little bit sooner, that these other therapies would have worked quicker. But that's not
Yeah.
how the story went. And
It's because cannabis lifts the boat, right? It affects so many things in your body positively that it allows you to start to participate in those other things. They'll use those other tools that you had in the toolkit, and it all
yeah,
starts to work. And then here you are,
here
like
I am. Here
the
I
epitome of
am.
healthy
That's
woman.
So, well, that's what it is this plant
Yeah.
has now changed my life. I have a mission, a vision, a purpose to bring hope,
Mhm.
inspiration, and growth for healing, just to share information and share stories, and
Yeah.
even come a little bit more out of the closet with my own personal story, because I guarantee you I have been through it. I mean, when
Yeah.
you I've been through it. And I want to go over one last thing too. This is like another hypothesis. So
All
we were
right.
saying about, really quickly, so we were talking about whole plant and the entourage effect.
Hmm.
So go back to the umbrella. Okay. So if you
Yeah.
think about it, if we have just THC or CBD showering on our umbrella,
Hmm.
right? That's
Hmm.
better than nothing. But just imagine the whole plant
Yeah.
showering on the umbrella all at
Hmm.
the same time, right?
Hmm.
Going where it needs to go, doing what it needs to do to bring homeostasis and balance. And so basically, that whole plant supports the rest of the cannabinoids and terpenes, so people don't need as much.
Right.
That's what I,
Right.
so I think
Yeah.
that's a pretty cool, that's just my
Yeah. And
thought.
it's not about getting high. That's
No,
the stigma. That's the old story. It's not. It's just not about that. It's about living your best life.
totally. It is about
Yeah.
living your best life.
Yeah.
Yeah. So cannabinoid therapeutics plus cannabis plus a healthy lifestyle. We do more of what supports the endocannabinoid system. We do less of
Mhm.
what does not support the endocannabinoid system. And basically, cannabinoid therapeutics promotes total health care, bio, psycho, social, spiritual healing.
Yes. Yes. Yes.
So, this has been a great conversation, Mark,
As usual.
as
We have
usual.
conversations.
Yes. And so, Mark has a book. I've been inspired by his book that I've been reading, and I have it at my bedside. It is
Oh,
called Absolutely Fucking Amazing. And it is
living the
on,
life you love.
it's great, Living the Life You Love. And so, we're going to put a link up here. I'm going to go back and edit this, and we're going to make sure you all can have access to this book. It's truly life changing, and some of the things that Mark writes in his book is I've been utilizing some
Mhm.
tools that I'd used in the past that I'd forgotten about,
We
and that
do. We do. Most of the
hey,
time, we just need to be reminded that we have these tools in the toolkit.
yep,
And man, when we pull them out, we start using them.
we become
Life
more
does get
powerful and
easier.
loving.
I swear, I'm telling you, I have the most amazing life ever.
All
Yes.
right, everyone, thank you for joining us. Join us next week for another Nurse Mark and the Green
And the
Nurse
green
podcast,
nurse.
where we talk about things that people don't talk about to bring you
That's
hope
right.
and inspiration for growth and healing.
Yes.
All right.
Hey, how are you? Happy Monday. Oh, doesn't that sound awful? Welcome to Cannabis Chat, everybody. I'm Jimmy Young from Pro Cannabis Media, and I am so happy to have alongside once again our pal from flowerandtonic.com, Alissa Merrill. How are you, Alissa, today?
Good. How are you?
Never a dull moment in the world of cannabis and COVID. Sure enough, our home state of Massachusetts, our governor, Charlie Baker, has decided to bring things back a little bit as we enter into the flu season. And of course, depending on where you happen to be watching this, here in Massachusetts, we got about 5-6 inches of snow outside your house over the weekend. Trick or treat there, Alissa?
Yeah, that was super fun. Yes.
Did you still? Well. I just want to know, did you have any trick or treaters at your house at all?
I literally threw candy at my kids. Like we made them stand outside and just hucked candy at them. Not joking. But it was kind of funny. It was memorable. And then we smashed pumpkins. And so that's what we're probably going to do tonight. But yeah, it's a weird week. I have a feeling this is going to be a strange week. This is Monday. And I just feel like I said to my girls on the way home from school today, this is just going to be a week that, we're going to want to journal and remember. But yes, I mean, let's start with your news. But yeah, I think there's going to be a lot of interesting.
Well, needless to say, tomorrow we're on the day before Election Day, most anticipated election certainly in my lifetime for sure. And we have absolutely no idea what is going to happen. But we do know that there are 5 states out there that are going to make a decision on whether or not they bring in a medical marijuana program or an adult use recreational program. And all eyes obviously are on the Senate seats that are available in this election and to see which way that Senate might swing one way or another. And of course, there's a presidential election tomorrow as well. And I believe I saw 92 million people have already voted, Alissa. That's a pretty amazing total considering the polls haven't opened yet. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah. I do. I don't even know what to say. Yeah. People are fighting. I'm just so tired of it. I want it to be over. I don't talk politics often. I like to be engaged in a conversation about politics, but that was one thing my dad taught me was, you vote in private for a reason. And he's like, no one has to really know what your vote is. That, and stay away from pyramid schemes and never lend money unless you don't need it, unless you can go without it. Those were good tips. But the voting, the politics one, I love being involved. So I feel like this is going to be we're going to have some guests who have a lot to say about politics and cannabis. I think I didn't realize how much was at stake with this election.
Oh, yes. And we'll be talking with 3 great guests that you've helped us get onto this show today. And one of them is Ted Reynolds, and I believe he's coming up at the bottom of this hour in about 25 minutes or so. And tell us a little something about Ted Reynolds that you know.
Well, I met him last year at the Cannabinoid convention in Boston, and he's one of the original extraction experts. He worked with Charlotte's Web doing some of the original extractions. So he's also I think he was a semi-professional athlete. So he's, you coming from that world, the aches and pains kind of led him to learning more about cannabis, but he's used it more as a supplement. Like he's into the health fitness world of DHEA and things that honestly, I don't really understand. So he's my expert when it comes to fish oil supplements and, there are all these things that prime your endocannabinoid system that we're not really utilizing, that make things work better. So it's all about the homeostasis. And then there's the synergy of some of these supplements plus cannabis is pretty amazing. So
good.
So he's a big advocate about health when it comes to health and wellness, and a younger version of Mr. MacKay, who's one of the original extraction experts.
That's right. He may be is he the father of the extraction world? Because Lord knows he's been around a long time. And Dr. John MacKay we're talking about, and that's coming up in just in about 53 minutes or so. And then we round it off with Rob Dhoble at 5:30, I believe. Am I right, Alissa?
Yes, and he came from the pharmaceutical world, so we kind of bonded over our, frustrations, and then our love for what we're doing now, but our frustrations with how, we really want to be communicating with physicians. So, he and I speak that language, and a lot to discuss there because he's making there's a lot of progress being made.
And there's still a lot of controversy too at the federal government level too, with different agencies pointing fingers at each other. I'm sure we'll get into that conversation with all three of these guys, because we all know we're all sitting here waiting for history of some kind to be written, and hopefully there will be some kind of a peaceful display of democracy. Let's leave it at that over the next 48 hours. I'm a little wary about what might happen no matter what the result is. One way or another. I think people are too quick to act on a violent level when it comes to an emotional decision that affects all of us. And, I really do believe in, can we all just chill out, get along, and talk this thing through? Because violence isn't going to answer anything. And if anything, it puts a bad taste in everybody's mouth when you react violently. So we're certainly preaching peace, love, and happiness over here at Pro Cannabis Media. Just quickly, let me just give you some of the updates in Massachusetts on what it's not a rollout, it's a rollback. I guess it's kind of like turning the clocks back over this past weekend. They're going to bring back gatherings have to be limited to no more than 10 people. It was at 25. They did have some indoor dining rules that they were slowly bringing in. Well, guess what? They're rolling those back. Now all restaurants have to close at 9:30 p.m. And they also, you cannot go out. Well, it's not really martial law, but they're encouraging people to stay home from 10 p.m. to 5 a.m. And of course, everything is still up in the air with all that stuff. They want everybody wearing a face covering in public, including anybody over the age of 5. I just want to know who's actually taking the IDs of the 4.5-year-old, whether or not the kid has a mask on or not. Really?
Right.
I mean, you don't have to worry about that. Your kids do everything you ask them to do, don't they, Alissa?
No, they don't mind the mask. I don't love the mask. They, no one does, but yeah, they don't seem fazed by it. They seem to accept things a lot easier, thankfully. So at least there's that.
I think everybody knows it's designed to not just to keep you from infecting anybody else, just in case you might have this. So it truly is an unselfish act to wear a mask, because you are protecting others from you, as opposed to you thinking that they might have it or whatever. And it is what it is. Let's see.
I just feel
what else?
Don't you feel like, I'm sorry, I just have to say this, because don't you feel like the mask could be a little better developed by now? It's been 9 months. Shouldn't we have phase 2 masks or something that are see-through or easier to speak? I just feel like that's just puzzling me. I don't know, my expectations, though, again, this is where my expectations are super high, and maybe, I don't know, but I've seen these ads for the ones that are see-through. Have you seen those?
Yeah. You know what? I've seen the see-through masks. I've also seen the masks that make it look like your face, which I think are the best masks, because I miss looking at people's faces. And the other ones that are out there, they've got the little ventilator thing. I got one of those now. I've got one I can throw in the wash. They're all different shapes and sizes, and even those light ones are probably the easiest ones to just leave in your car, so you don't forget that you need a mask when you go out in public. And I support that 100%.
Oh, yes.
We're still in a COVID pandemic here for people. This is one of the things that I just can't believe we're still saying after 8 months of this. Have we learned anything? Yeah, we've learned how to be germaphobes, and I think that has helped. But certainly, Massachusetts has been kind of on the forefront of dealing with this pandemic from the very beginning, really since that meeting in February down at the Seaport area. That was
the Biogen meeting.
Meeting. Thank you very much. Exactly right.
My daughter, Oh, but what's very interesting? John MacKay. We should speak to him a little bit. His expertise is in terpenes. So I've heard from some really smart scientists that there's a lot to do with pollen in the air, terpenes, and sunlight. And the combination of those three, like that combination kept us a little safer. And now it's when the air is so dry, and something about those three kind of had a protective quality that they hadn't quite figured out yet. So that might be something we could talk to him about, because we've had a very dramatic shift in weather as of late. So yeah, I didn't know that the restrictions were that tight. Was that announced today?
That was announced about an hour ago. So this is breaking news, as they say in the old business of mine. They just released these. A couple of other things. We mentioned that there are 5 states that are voting on medical or adult use. The only state right now that they're worried about, although they're not sure about Montana right now, which I think is interesting. Mississippi still, it can go either way. New Jersey is certainly expected to pass it 3-1, which I think is good. And finally, the New Zealand vote was finally turned down. But here's an interesting note about the New Zealand vote. It turns out the newly re-elected Prime Minister, and her name is Jacinda Ardern, didn't reveal her support for the measure until after it failed. And it says here, annoying its backers. I'm guessing that annoyed their backers indeed. Let's see what else we got here. We have a lot of new products on the market that have infused either CBD or THC, especially in California. And there are a whole slew of celebrities now that are getting involved with that. And one is Gwyneth Paltrow, and the others, Rebel Wilson, who, by the way, I have like no idea who that is, or Darren Criss.
Awesome.
I have no idea who that is. I bet you know them all.
Yeah, no, I don't really, but she's Pitch Perfect. Like, that's classic.
Okay. Well, I know Gwyneth Paltrow. Okay, that one I know.
Yes, and she actually has really good, yes, she's had some good information. She's into the holistic natural medicine. So, yeah, very interesting. I never really had interest in her. We can discuss that another day.
That is the THC beverage Cann, C-A-N-N. That's all 3 of those celebrities are now investing in that. And let's see. Did you know who the parent company of Zigzag is? That's just one of those weird things that I just learned. Did you know?
No.
It's called Turning Point. And it's a vape outfit Dosis raised $15 million from Turning Point, the parent company of Zigzag rolling papers and several smokeless tobacco brands.
Dosis, you said?
Yeah. Yeah. So, can I tell you? Let's see. This is a lot of California stuff. I'm going to pass that. I mean, no big deal. I mean, in that we do come from the East Coast, but we do know we have viewers and followers from California out that way. So I'm not totally going to ignore it. And let's see. Oh, well, here's the interesting item I think that we will get into with all the CBD experts that we're talking to over the next hour and a half or so. Mm-hmm. Are you familiar with the term hot hemp?
Not really, no.
Okay, so a new DEA rule which takes a hard line on hot hemp has alarmed the CBD industry. And now 9 House members are writing the organization, the agency DEA, expressing concern. The rule considers anything containing more than 0.3% THC to be federally illegal and subject to prosecution under the Controlled Substances Act. Now, that doesn't surprise, right?
Right. No, and people are kind of I mean, idiots are like growing. Sorry, but potheads. No, just that's horrible. They're growing like right next to THC plants. So like they combine and like there's drifts. And so if you're in Colorado and your farm is next to one with heavy THC products, then there's a pretty good likelihood there's going to be drifts, and very unregulated. So I think that's not a bad thing. I think that's reasonable. If you're growing hemp, grow hemp. If you want to grow other things, do that. But be honest about it.
And that's it. Yeah. And look, the whole hemp regulations continue to be a battleground for different agencies in Washington, D.C. And I'm guessing all 3 of the people that we'll be talking to will have some thoughts on that as well.
Yeah. John, Yeah, fascinating. There was some stuff that I honestly like. I don't believe in a lot of conspiracy theories. I try to stay away from things that sound like conspiracy, I'm a little shocked though at like what's been available for studies and the reasoning why things haven't been published. And John will speak more to that intelligently, but it's the upcoming changes are going to highlight a lot of like what we already know, which will be pretty exciting about CBD and hemp and cannabis. So,
well, I mean, so much is, kind of a lot will change if there is a change. How's that? If there is a change in our governmental structure and the people in our government, we will see more fast changes in the cannabis space than probably any other industry over the next 6 months. For a number of reasons. And one in particular is, it seems to me that if we go to the decriminalization side of things on the federal level, and we open up the banks to the cannabis industry, that means we're going to also open up research opportunities in this space, and there'll be a lot more jobs involved and available. So here's what we're going to do, Alissa. I get to talk a little bit about 420 because, on this show, we're live on Mondays, Wednesdays, and Fridays, and we always take a break at 420, and I get to explain to people who may not know, and I am always surprised that there are still people out there that do not understand how 420 originated and the role that the high school kids from San Rafael, California played in this whole thing. So I'm going to talk a little bit about 420 here. On the other side of our break, we'll welcome in our first guest, and Alissa and I will continue to chat and interview the 3 people that we have planned to interview during the next 90 minutes or so. 420, let's get back to that. 1971, San Rafael High School, a bunch of guys, what a shock. They decide they want to meet outside the high school 20 past 4 every day at the Louis Pasteur statue that was across the street from the high school. And that's the place, that was their meeting place at 20 past 4 so they could go out and catch a little buzz. Now, law enforcement figured this out after a while and adopted that 420 call so that it equated with public consumption of cannabis. There's a 420 going on at the corner of Main and Dean Street or whatever, and they would send a car down there and they'd probably either arrest or certainly hassle anybody that they would find, because at that time in the 70s, it was very much against the law to possess even a joint or two. And sure enough, now we've made a lot of progress since then. So the 420 code has been adopted by the cannabis community, and my version of the 420 was a song produced and sang by a guy named Jonathan Edwards, and the song was Shanty, and it really does kind of speak for itself. So we're going to take a break, listen to Shanty, and we'll be back on the other side.
Yeah, this is a tune that I wrote back in 19... I've forgotten. We had a saying in our old band, one of my first bands in 1966 or so. What are you going to do tonight? Oh, just, like every other night, just going to lay around the shanty and put a good buzz on. Gonna sit down in the kitchen, fix me something good to eat. Make my head a little high, make the whole day complete. Gonna lay around the shanty, oh mama, and put a good buzz on. Pass it to me, baby, pass it to me slow. We'll take time out to smile a little before you let her go. We're gonna lay around the shanty, oh mama, and put a good buzz on. You're on something. Go ahead. Brodsky, everybody. There's nothing to do and there's always room for more. Fill it, light it, shut up and close that door, baby. We're gonna lay around the shanty, mama, and put a good buzz on. Take it, okay. Prohibition never works, it's time to realize it. It grows in my backyard, it's time to legalize it. We're gonna lay around the shanty, mama, and put a good buzz on. I'm gonna sit down in my rented car, I'm gonna jam it into drive. Gonna head on out and play at WSCA with Sean. I'm glad I'm alive. We're gonna lay around the shanty, mama, and put a good buzz on. Every night and day, we're gonna lay around the shanty, mama, and put a good buzz on.
Nice. It's Friday. Thank God.
All right. Thank you very much, Mr. Jonathan Edwards, and our friends at I think it's SDA. I keep screwing that up, but it's a radio station in Portsmouth, New Hampshire, for that little song, that little interlude. And we are waiting to connect with Ted Reynolds. We see that he's in our Zoom room, but we haven't seen an image yet or actually seen that he can talk. His audio is on. So, Alissa, you and I will continue to talk a little bit more about the cannabinoid medicine world. And Ted, I'll give you a little background on him. This guy spent a lot of time in labs. And I know, Alissa, you too have spent times in labs for testing of products, correct?
Yes. I love lab tests. Yes.
What's that? I mean, I'm guessing that, seeing as which people are getting onto airplanes with hazmat suits, I'm guessing that in a lab, they're wearing these really intense hazmat suits too, because they don't want to infect anything. In fact, I couldn't even go into a grow room at a dispensary because I didn't have my hazmat suit with me. So needless to say, those in the industry are pretty protective of their plants that they're testing. Yes?
Yes. Yes. I mean, Ted works with everything. Like, he works with the devices that mix the products. So, to make sure that there he is. Hi. That's how I first met him, through a product called the Speed Mixer, which I call the cookie mixer. So take all the recipes and put them together. So I'll let him share a little more with that. But yes, so we met about a year ago talking at this cannabinoid conference where he was promoting some of the manufacturing technology. So.
Well, there you go. And now I see him, and I'm going to assume that he can hear us. So now I'm going to say, hello, Ted.
Hi, Jimmy.
And how are you?
I'm doing well. How about yourself?
Good. Thank you very much for joining us. We're going to boost your volume a little bit so we can hear it here in the studio as well as online. But I'm going to read your bio. It says here you're a co-founder of EndoSyn. Can you give us a little brief on what EndoSyn is?
So EndoSyn, I would call in a nutshell a cannabinoid research and development company with a focus on endocannabinoids themselves.
Gotcha. And I'm not going to ask you to list them because we all know them as ABCD, CBD, ABD, THCA, BN, CBN. I'm only kidding. I'm trying to be a goof here, and there's nothing to be goofy about cannabinoid medicine because there's so much to learn about the different molecules that make up the cannabis sativa plant. And it seems that every month or so, another one is discovered. Is that accurate?
Yeah, I mean, just in the last few years alone, I've seen the number jump from around 80 to now over 144 that have been definitely identified. And there's, theory that there's probably much more that we haven't discovered yet.
That's just crazy. Now, obviously, we're joined by Alissa Merrill. My name's Jimmy Young, and I appreciate you coming on. It does say here in your bio that you have actually visited over 100 different cannabis labs all over North America. When you go to a lab, what exactly are you looking for?
So usually we're in the extraction or product development department. And so it's not that I'm there looking for anything in particular. They're usually seeking out our, equipment and expertise and helping them optimize their cannabis processing. So that's what I'm primarily there to do is help people make better medicine and a higher quality, faster, and be more efficient with it.
Alissa, you could jump in here anytime, but I do have one question for Ted about the extraction process. And I understand decarboxylation. How's that? I even got that out in the first time. But there's also a way to extract the magic, if you will, from the cannabis plant at home. I mean, I've seen people do it on their stoves. What is the advantage of a really big, high-priced piece of equipment versus doing it on your own at home?
Well, there'll be differences in the extracts that you're doing at home versus the ones that are produced commercially. The solvents have a lot to do with what you can do with the end product. So for, say, an at-home extraction, commonly oil, like olive oil, for example, or ethanol will be used. And those turn into primarily ingestible products or maybe even topical, but you're not going to be inhaling those types of products. So when you get over to the other solvents with like butane, propane, CO2, those typically wind up being an inhaled product because after you remove the solvents, it's a safer product to inhale versus like alcohol, ethanol based. You don't want to really inhale that. And then obviously inhaling just food oils is not going to work and probably not good for you either. So that's the primary differences between the two, at home versus commercial.
Okay, there you go. Because we're being a little light, but that vitamin E stuff that was in those vapes was not a good thing to be putting in anything that you had to inhale. I remember that part happening with the vaping crisis from a few months back. Never a dull moment in the cannabis space. I see here, excuse me?
No, I mean, I met Ted because I was questioning, like, how do I find better, safer products? And he was my go-to because it kind of starts, I think, at the lab, and starts at the testing, but even before that, and how and we can talk to John more in depth, but like how it's actually extracted from the plant. So there's so many pieces to what makes a product safe. And then actually work then becomes the next challenge. So, and that's where I've really looked at his expertise. So, because we're still struggling to find good products here, I think, in Massachusetts. So, Ted, what would you say is the most exciting piece of equipment or exciting news advancement happening right now in product development?
So I think the most exciting thing on that side is probably the development of yeast production. So much like a lot of pharmaceuticals like insulin or even B vitamins for that matter, for a lot of supplements, they're made using yeast or some kind of organism like algae or microbes. And the fact that the yeast derived cannabinoids are now feasible and in production and able to be integrated into all the cannabinoid products that are out there, I think is the most exciting. following the model of aspirin, which is like a white willow bark derivative, to grow enough aspirin using purely natural white willow bark, you'd have to grow it in every forest in the planet. So cannabinoids, looking to take the same kind of demand level to be able to keep up with that kind of production. I think the advancement of yeast is extremely exciting.
Wow. So yeah, that's like, I didn't know we were going there. I was thinking just like a good topical, but yeah, I mean, that's like where, oh no, it's exciting though. I'm glad you did. Cause I feel like we're always like one step further. Like, I think I'm already bored with CBD now that like, we're really able to dig in and talk about it. I'm like, let's move on to the next. And you're kind of, I think we're on the same page there. And that is, I think, an exciting direction, because Jimmy, when we're talking about all this stuff, it's a plants, and plants like molds and, and they go bad. I mean, there's so many bad products out there, as I've learned from Ted,
Right.
Ted. So there's a lot of opportunity to do much better, but it's also a plant you're working with. So
I've got a question for Ted, and it's obvious that did you take organic chemistry in college, Ted?
Just a couple times.
Every single person I went to school with that was much smarter than me, mostly pre-med people, had to take that organic chemistry. And I just remember it really filtered out the haves from the have-nots, let's just say. Probably one of the toughest courses. But and I'm joking a little bit about this, but I got to ask this question about knowledge of the policymakers in Washington, D.C. Right now we've got the DEA pointing the fingers at the FDA and pointing the fingers at the USDA, the Department of Agriculture. No one wants to take responsibility for regulating CBD or or all the cannabinoids that are in this plant. They're all pointing each other. Oh, well, if it's over 0.3%, that's going to be yours. Well, if it's 4%, though, it's not really mine because it's just over, whatever. Point being is, how frustrating is it for someone who's as smart as you, the scientists who understand the plant? Are you getting called to Washington? Are there people lobbying for the right thing? Are they asking for information from people like yourself, the scientists that are out there that are working in this space, or are they just making it up as they go along?
I would say it's probably a little bit of both. I would say on the state levels, there's definitely a lot more involvement in bringing the stakeholders, the scientists that are part of it, into the discussions and to figure out the regulatory framework. I think Colorado does a pretty good job, and I'm pretty familiar with some of the people that are in this scientific kind of lobbying group, so to speak. At the federal level, with the FDA particularly, they have called for public opinion on suggestions on how to regulate CBD. Now, it isn't a science or research only type of forum, so it's drawing in any kind of public opinion you have. So whether it's an anecdote of treating your ailment, but it's illegal in your state or what have you, there is a lot of commentary from people on suggesting how CBD should be looked at, let alone cannabis. But for the THC levels and that amount and discussion for that marijuana classification of a plant, I don't think I see a whole lot of discussion being invited in from any scientific body. And it's kind of ironic because the National Institute of Health actually has a patent on cannabinoids, including THC, as an antioxidant and neuroprotectant. So our own governmental health bodies are saying there is medical application for these cannabinoids, yet it's the rest of the three-letter agencies didn't get that memo.
Right, and it's still a Schedule I drug. We all get this. So let's do some hypothetical here. Let's pretend for a minute it's a month from now.
Yeah.
Okay. And there's a new administration, at least voted in to Washington, D.C., and everything's going swimmingly. And Lord knows I'd love to believe that is going to happen, but I don't for a minute. If you were in charge of the regulations for CBD infusion in beverages or in food, what would be, how would you go about doing that, and what would be your recommendations?
Dietary supplements have a pretty good framework. Some people like to say that there's, loopholes, so to speak, for unsafe products, when it's actually quite difficult to have an unsafe product in that space. You do have to do what's called as a self-affirmed GRAS study. And that's where you get a panel of scientific experts to determine the safety of your product. Now, currently, that's not being done because it's not required. We're kind of Wild West with the CBD, is nobody's taking ownership of it. But I would like to see that pathway be granted so that people could prove the safety of their products, which is the primary concern with CBD. It's not that it's a narcotic or an intoxicant. It's the safety profile needs to be established. And producers need to go through that study to prove that their products are safe by the way that they process and manufacture them, including the ancillary ingredients that they use, say for nano products. Nano products are really getting up in popularity, but there's not a whole lot of discussion about the fact that nano emulsions, once in the bloodstream, will nano emulsify the other the other medications in your system that are in your bloodstream. So it can amplify the effects of whatever co-medications you're taking. So that's where it gets potentially dangerous. Now, the risk factor with that is probably fairly low for the average commercial product. But for people that are immune compromised or taking it as a life-saving medication, there needs to be careful notation of the safety profiles with these products that they're taking.
There you go.
And Ted, could you speak a little bit too? So Ted's really an expert, when it comes to the endocannabinoid system. He taught me about, I never believed in any of this stuff, like fish oil. I hated when I was pregnant, but I took it and I believe in it, but I never understood it. And he really explained that how, can you speak a bit about, the endocannabinoid 101 and kind of how we can make our products work better, I guess.
Yeah. Okay. So I'll go in reverse, I guess. So at the cannabinoid conference that Alissa and I met at, there was a statement made by one of the researchers. I can't remember exactly which one, but was talking about entourage effects and the different cannabinoids and terpenes, but also endocannabinoids that can potentially synergize together for a different outcome for a medication. And what he said was there's more iterations of cannabinoid synergies than there are stars in the observable universe. So meaning that we have probably an infinite number of these different cannabinoid products that can be come up with for various ailments. Now, I believe going into the future that cannabinoid medications will one day be seen as a first-line treatment for almost all chronic illness. And getting into the endocannabinoid 101 will kind of explain that. So the endocannabinoid system is one of the human body's oldest regulatory system. So it's balancing homeostasis, the balance of energy essentially, and how energy is being used throughout the body. It goes back 600 million years. So we can find evidence of the ECS back in microbes in the ocean before life even sprouted legs. So it's in our mitochondria. And if you remember 8th grade biology, the mitochondria is the powerhouse of the cell. So there's cannabinoid receptors on your mitochondria and basically going up in scale of life form from there. So your cannabinoid receptors are found all throughout the cell. It's found on the outside of the cell, like many of us know. And it's also found in pretty much nearly every cell in the human body. As far as it's been identified, every tissue type has cannabinoid receptors there. It even goes so far to identify cannabinoid receptors as the most common G-coupled protein receptor in the brain. And G-coupled protein receptors are the largest class of receptors for neurotransmitters in your brain. So cannabinoid receptors are the largest class of neurotransmitter receptors in your brain, more than dopamine, endorphins, GABA, any of those. So there's been very little attention from mainstream medicine on literally the most abundant neurotransmitter receptor in your body. Going up from that, so the endocannabinoid system comprises of mainly three things. The enzymes that make it, so that convert fatty acids into an endocannabinoid, the endocannabinoid themselves, and then the receptors. And then I guess a fourth component, the enzymes that break them back down into the first two components. So the components of an endocannabinoid are primarily omega acids. And so this goes to nutrition and into pharmacology, but the omega acids we consume in our diet, you've heard for years omega-3s are good for you and blah, blah, blah. But until recently, it wasn't really known what they were doing. And so what we found, or researchers have found, is that they're making endocannabinoids, these omegas that we eat. And so that's why it's important to have a balanced omega diet for many reasons, but a primary one being the endocannabinoid system.
All right, so this is the fatty acid chain. We're going back to because Jimmy, are you following any of this? So
I'm taking notes. It's like I'm at a chemistry class and I'm taking notes.
I know. I need to dumb it down, and then I need to dumb it down further because I hardly understand it.
You can dumb it down for me. I'm comfortable with that because I flunked 8th grade biology. Go ahead.
I'm not embarrassed to say it because you know what? It's scary that doctors aren't educated this way. So it's just I think a lot of people were trying to figure out what's true and what's, everyone was for a while was taking fish oil and it was gross, I think. People just kind of gave up on it, but I kind of think, right? The trends kind of have gone up and down with fish oil and omega-3s. Am I right? Or
I mean, their sales numbers, as any indication of their growth, keep going up. So more and more people are using omega-3s.
Okay. I take them every day. Big old fat fish oil pill. Yes, ma'am. That's what I'm doing.
Okay, so that's back at the foundation. That's the fatty acid chain you were talking about.
Right. So cannabis evolved to mimic this system, which makes it highly unique as a plant species on the planet, because the plant recognized through its evolution that by making these cannabinoids, the phytocannabinoids, THC, CBD, it was feeding the endocannabinoid system of everything around it. So animals, for instance, humans have been propagating cannabis for 10,000 years, plus. And we've spread it all over the planet. So it's almost like there's this co-evolution where cannabis wanted to, reproduce, which is what organisms want to do. And it paired up with humans to feed our endocannabinoid system. And then we spread it all over the world.
Now, can we use it to knock out this goddamn virus that everybody's still freaking out about? I don't know if you follow, I'm sure you follow research, but we got to interview Dr. Igor Kovalchuk from the University of Lethbridge in Alberta, and he was doing some modeling and how COVID and cannabis, could interact, or one could stop the flow. You know who I'm talking about?
I don't know him particularly, but I've seen some of the studies that are coming out on COVID and cannabinoids.
Yeah.
And is there hope?
I definitely. There's also an endocannabinoid that many people are not familiar with that's actually been studied effective in 6 other coronaviruses in humans, human clinical trials. It's called palmitoyl ethylamide, or PEA for short. Now, if you search for PEA, you might get a few different things.
Prince Edward Agency. Sorry. I'm being a goof. I'm trying to lighten it up because I got to tell you, half this conversation goes right over my head. But what you just said is very interesting to me, just because of how the endocannabinoid system works and how this COVID virus attacks a certain part of our bodies, mostly in our lungs, right?
So as far as I understand it, the primary thing is a blood clotting issue with COVID because of the inflammation. So the cytokine storm. So the cytokines being an inflammatory molecules, basically. And so cannabinoids are anti-inflammatory. All cannabinoids are anti-inflammatory.
Right.
So that's where it could potentially have use for this, is that it's diminishing the inflammation caused from COVID rather than, like killing the virus itself, as far as I understand it.
Right. Okay. Well, do we lose his audio?
No.
Sorry. I'm sorry. I didn't. All right. Thank you for letting me know that. I appreciate that. Gosh, yikes. All right. So I want to go back to the COVID pandemic and the virus. One of the things, it happened to a Red Sox player this year, Eduardo Rodriguez, got COVID, got positive tested, and then it attacked his heart. He had has something wrong with his heart, and they've tied it to the COVID. Mm-hmm. Is there, am I crazy to say, is there a way to undo some of the damage that COVID has done through using some of the cannabinoids that we've discovered?
That's a good question.
Woohoo!
Like a recovery kind of, right? Like that is kind of what we describe it as being, as a recovery. So
right.
Yeah. There's many ways you can look at the biochemistry and what it's shown us so far, and you could probably deduce from there that it likely has benefit for recovery because of all of the benefits that it does. Now, will there be a human clinical trial on that?
Right.
Not in this country, but maybe in Israel or somewhere else. But as a betting man, I would put money on it being beneficial for recovery, given all of the benefits from all cannabinoids in general.
Interesting. So
what do you take as a daily supplement, as someone who studies this, as someone who, like as an expert, what should we be taking if we're using, cannabis medically or recreationally, like just to feel better on a regular basis and to have more of a even keeledness about us, I guess?
Right. So I look at cannabinoids from cannabis as kind of a stopgap. It is temporary relief from a more systemic issue. Okay. So I think if you have a good foundation, say with your omegas, for example, given that's the primary means of production, then go from there. So if you have a good foundation, but you're still having issues, then, start looking elsewhere. But until you fix the foundation of a house, you can make the roof look pretty, you could, put in accordion doors, whatever, the foundation of that house is still going to crumble. So I say start with the foundation, which is omegas. Primarily omega-3 DHA is the one almost all of us are deficient in, given most of us don't live near coastal cities and eat plenty of seafood, and that's almost the only source of DHA.
And that builds the fatty acid, which is the first layer, right? That
builds your cell membrane.
I'm trying to make this simple. So after all that talk, so then that omega-3 will help build a stronger cell membrane, which will help kind of guide the receptor or open. Okay.
So it helps in a few ways. So the omegas you can think of as like structure components of the cell membrane. And so the omega gives you good structure for your cannabinoid receptors to work properly because they float in the membrane. Okay. So they're floating around like that. But then additionally, it produces its own endocannabinoids and that have, high anti-inflammatory, antioxidant properties, stuff like that. So it's kind of two-pronged. But start with omega-3 DHA, DHA specifically, not other omega-3s, but I won't get into that.
No, but DHA specifically, we can maybe share a little bit on through Pro Cannabis or Flower and Tonic about what your recommendations are. But DHA, and then do you have a certain amount that you recommend, or do you have or foods also that we can eat that might help?
Yeah, so salmon, tuna, mackerel, cod, they have DHA. So basically cold water fish. Sardines actually have a lot.
Anchovies?
I think anchovies too, yeah.
Okay.
If they're a cold water fish, yeah, most likely.
Okay. I'm one of the few people that actually have their Caesar salad with extra anchovies. Okay.
We can talk about probiotics and prebiotics, and that's the other like really interesting part of this all that I think, right?
Well, that goes to the endocannabinoid system, being everywhere in the body. It's even in our microbiome. So, how our gut flora talks to the rest of our body. Well, researchers have found that our microbes will actually produce different endocannabinoids in the gut. And then off they go to communicate with the rest of the body. Even THC has been researched to influence the microbiome and promote the growth of beneficial bacteria. So there's all sorts of like universal communication happening at the endocannabinoid system level. It's even thought the placebo effect could be stemming from the endocannabinoid system.
Huh.
The music, wasn't that like the first like real proof of the endocannabinoid system? Am I right? The study on music and
that's a recent study, yeah, but that's originally the endocannabinoid system was found because they were looking for a THC receptor in the late 80s, early 90s.
Well, thank you, Justin Bieber, because I officially love him. And he makes my I get happy. Like you can't hear his song. Like he's got a new song. You just can't help it make me happy. And that's, I believe, the endocannabinoid system. So I'll take my fish oils, right? And no, I'm sorry, not fish oil. My DHA.
DHA. Wait, and is that just built into our foods, or can you actually just enhance? Can you go to like a nutrition store and get DHA pills?
What you'll find is that you never find it alone. DHA is not really available alone. Yep. And I wouldn't recommend to take it just alone, but it is the primary one that we're all deficient in. So there are like extra DHA fish oil or algae oil that you can get to come up and boost your levels.
Wow. This is great. I got to tell you, Ted, I'm really impressed. I mean, first of all, I'm going to admit, I took a lot of notes. I kind of followed where you were going with this. I've done a lot of research. I've certainly talked to enough people that I understand the whole basis of the endocannabinoid system and the role it plays in our neurotransmitters. But everybody thinks I know a lot about cannabis now, and it's a joke when I talk to somebody like you, because it's like, I didn't take chemistry in college.
They don't teach you this in college. You gotta the whole endocannabinoid system stuff. You gotta go self-teach on that one because it's not really available.
There you go. Well, we do know that there's a little movement going on that we may actually start to see more of this being taught at colleges and in med schools, and there are more and more universities that are finally understanding that this is a plant medicine. And there's so many fascinating different aspects of it that they're finally looking at perhaps doing more studies. And if we move forward and get this stuff decriminalized and open up the research, all of a sudden you're going to have research assistants and jobs and grants. And the more knowledge we have, the better we're going to understand the role that this plant has played for thousands of years in all of our bodies, right?
Right. Yes.
So we certainly hope that happens. Well, Ted Reynolds, I really appreciate you taking some time, giving me a little chemistry lesson. I appreciate that. I have my notes, and if you do want to send me a quiz on email, I'll give it my best shot.
I grade on a curve, so.
Fair enough. And if it's me against Alissa, I give up. All right, here, because I go to her for my expertise whenever I need something like that. So.
And that's where this industry is so scary, because sometimes it's like 6 degrees of separation, but these are the experts we should be looking to. And so I'm grateful for your time, Ted. Thank you.
That's right. And we've got a big expert coming up in just a few minutes. Dr. John MacKay is going to be joining us. So Ted Reynolds, by the way, can people get in touch with you? You're a public speaker. I see that on here. How do people get in touch with you?
I would say LinkedIn is probably the easiest way to get a hold of me. Ted Reynolds. You'll see my picture. It'll say EndoSyn, Can of Complete, Speed Mixer on there. And you can find me there pretty easily.
And that's where I found your bio. So thank you, Ted Reynolds, for joining us. Appreciate it. And again, this is Medicinal Mondays on the Cannabis Chat show on the Pro Cannabis Media channel on Twitch, and it's also on YouTube, and it's on Facebook. It's on the procannabismedia.com website as well. And Alissa joins me just about every Monday to talk about cannabinoid medicine. And coming up in just a few minutes, we'll be talking with one of the premier authorities on this subject, Dr. John MacKay. But first, we're going to give you a little taste of what we've done, a little proof of performance, we call it a sizzle reel. It just kind of showcases what we've done over the last year. And we'll come back on the other side with our next interview as Cannabis Chat continues after this.
We are Pro Cannabis Media.
Well, hello there. Here we are again, another live stream from the new studio of Pro Cannabis Media. This is Cannabis Chat, and I'm Jimmy Young. Hi, everyone. Welcome to Weed Talk News. I'm Jimmy Young, the founder of Pro Cannabis Media.
And I'm Kurt Dalton, the founder of Cannabis.net.
Every week, Kurt and I get together to review some of the biggest stories in the cannabis industry. He and I talk about them. We have a few comments, and then we get reports from Canada, New York, and Washington, D.C.
And this week's no different, Jimmy. We finally have Vermont moving toward recreational cannabis with retail opening in their state. We have an old state and a new state, Colorado and Illinois, both setting cannabis sales records in July, as well as multiple efforts to legalize the cannabis plant in America, including our friend Steve D'Angelo getting involved.
But first, let's go to Deborah Borchardt in New York to check on the financial weed scene. Deborah?
Thanks, Kurt. Thanks, Jimmy. Well, things seem to keep going the wrong way for Charlotte's Web.
Whoa, Jimmy Young in the weeds on the water this week. We've got the CEO of Kushko, Nick Kovacevic, with me. This guy has built his little company in 6 years from $2 billion in sales to $145 million in sales.
We can get this thing to be fully legal here in the next few years, I believe, but it's going to take far longer for the stigma to change.
I think you guys are the pro cannabis story.
And I love Pro Cannabis Media.
Hi, I'm Jody Roberts with Eastern Security State, and I love Pro Cannabis Media.
Hi, I'm Laura Beener. I'm the president co-founder of The Healing Rose, and I love Pro Cannabis Media. It's been such an integral part of our success here at The Healing Rose.
And you know what? The best media company out there is Pro Cannabis Media. Look out for them. They'll make you famous.
Hi, I'm George, and I love Pro Cannabis Media. I also love Western Mass Hydroponics, where we've got everything you need from seed to bloom to bud, and then to smoke it afterwards.
All right, welcome back to Cannabis Chat here on Pro Cannabis Media. I'm Jimmy Young. I'm joined by Alissa Merrill from flowerandtonic.com, and we're so happy to be joined by Dr. John MacKay, who is he spent some time at Vermont when he was an undergrad, but he is out in California now, and he's one of the foremost authorities in this whole analytical testing and extraction process, and another one of these scientists that talks at a level that is so far above my pay grade, not that that's very high anyway, but I certainly enjoy talking to people like that. And Dr. John MacKay, thank you so much for joining us today.
Oh, it's a great pleasure. It's good to see everyone back there, but it's a little disheartening to have to watch football recently.
Well, hang on a second. You opened the door. You know I'm a former sportscaster, so does this mean you are a New England sports fan?
Yeah, so I grew up in Vermont, so I was heavily invested into the Montreal, Expos.
Or
And
the
then
Alouettes.
also, and then, no, not so much. And then, of course, the Red Sox. So I've been keeping stats on Red Sox since I was third grade. So, yeah.
Okay, that's cool. No, it has been a difficult, look, it's been difficult on all of us just walking around the world these days with,
Yes.
We've never had to go through a pandemic like we have right now. I don't know if you heard the news, but Governor Charlie Baker here in Massachusetts has rolled it back a little bit, and now gatherings have to be under 10 people, which will certainly affect everybody's Thanksgiving Day plans too. So we're not over this yet. In fact, I think we're right in the middle of the big second peak. So it is what it is. But I do want to ask you a little bit about where we are right now as a nation, because as you know, as everyone knows, within the next 48 hours or so, we'll have an election process. It's been ongoing now for a couple of weeks with mail-in votes or bring your ballot to the ballot box vote procedure. And there is definitely a distinction between the two sides here, at least on the presidential side. And I just wonder if the polls are correct and we move forward and the Democrats do take over, not just the presidency, but also the Senate, there seems to be a more solid movement for cannabis decriminalization as part of the platform. How is that going to have a trickle-down effect on everybody who's in the business now, who's just dying to either do banking or even do more research right off the top?
So number one is banking. And so that is the more difficult part because it's a cash-based business, and that breeds in its own right any type of movement that happens, not accountability. But I think one of the things that happens here is that I've been an advocate all through the parts of this is to set the boundaries, because we now have a market that the cart is ahead of the horse. And I would say that the horse hasn't been born yet. That's how far ahead it is. So we now have a nation that's buying products at gas stations and buying products at stores, and they don't even know what it is. And there's no foundation for making sure that we have compliance and regularity, purity. Number one on my side is safety. And number two is efficacy. So even if it's not ethical, I prefer if it was safe and unethical. I'm good with that. But I'm not good with, not having efficacy. And the other part is how much is in each one of these? What's the amount that will make a change in our metabolism? Much like we were talking before, is all those different sites are here, but you have to have a certain amount to be able to have it, make a significant difference in your metabolism. And then, there's so many unknowns to this and so many boundaries around the outside that we have to find out about them. And there's a lot of stuff happening now with, people making, I know it's another chemistry talk, but they're making isomers. And they're making things that the plant didn't naturally make that we haven't studied. So now we have degradation products and we have changes in chemistry, and people are taking these products without any knowledge of what's going to happen short term or long term. So we need science.
Right. Oh, we not only need science, we need science teachers and experts that could go into Washington, D.C. and talk to the DEA and the FDA and the U.S. Department of Agriculture and enlighten them to what's going on with this plant, because there's a lot of finger pointing that goes on at the federal government level, as you probably know. Who's going to be responsible for this, I guess, is my question.
I do think that there's a couple things. So I have been into the FDA, DEA, USDA, and talked to them locally as well as nationally. And one of the things that I've always said, it's kind of a joke, it's a cruel joke, but a lot of the people that are in government today went to school, they didn't take chemistry, but they took political science. For me, that's the right noun, it's the wrong adjective. Because you need to have the chemistry, you need to have the physics, you need to have those boundaries and be able to translate that for our political scientists that were the liberal arts that were on the other side of the St. Lawrence campus that I didn't see that much.
But that's the whole situation we're in right now with COVID too. Right? We're not, what am I trying to say? But aren't we, I don't know, are they looking, like, how are scientists like supposed to just step up and say, here, we know this about cannabis? Like, if you know, we were talking about a study recently that came out that was a little bit fascinating, that it's just, like, it mind boggles me that, like, where is the like communication between scientists and our government? Because it's a little alarming to think that there's so much information based on, conversations we've had, yet we just seem so far off from actually getting our hands on these products anytime soon.
Yeah, I got the new glasses without the adhesive tape in the middle, and I wear them, more straight nowadays.
Good.
But when you are perceived towards something like that, people believe that we're incomprehensible and that we are going to confuse things with facts. And many times I am incomprehensible. But when you go back through, it's a matter of one by one. So I train people on elevators, McDonald's or any other type of thing where I have a one-on-one conversation with anyone and talk about the cannabinoid system and what the different products are. And you have a lot of people, but it's not just a breakdown of that. It's just that in the United States, it's illegal to be able to do that work on campus. I taught the first class at Colorado State University this last fall. I got an opportunity to be in that first class, and it's for chemistry majors. And you're not allowed to bring anything in that would violate the policy that you might be teaching students how to do something illegal. So you're only dealing with hemp, but when you talk about extraction and they can interpret it, I can extract THC that way at my house or apartment, that's a fine boundary that you have to make sure that you're not crossing, because it is federally legal. And that's why often I was thinking about leaving the country, and some of my friends have left the country just to be able to do research.
And some of the best research is being done in these other countries, the same research that we could be
doing. We have some of the greatest universities and the tools and some of the greatest minds here, but Italy, Spain, Germany, Colombia, Australia, New Zealand is doing it. China is doing fabulous, groundbreaking work that I look at and said, I knew that back in 2012, but now you have, real studies that support it, but not in the United States.
It's interesting about the United States, though, because it's the anecdotal evidence and science that has driven the movement so far. And it's one of the reasons why I think we have a majority of our states have medicinal marijuana programs now.
Yes.
But how do we get to that next level? Is decriminalization at the federal level going to open up the doors for research more than anything else they can do?
No. And that's the part where it looks like a panacea that we just decriminalize, but you have to decriminalize in the right class. Because if you decriminalize everything, then the hemp market goes to nutraceuticals. It goes to dietary nutritional supplements. It goes to pharmaceutical, but does not go to anyone else within the industry. So you just shut down an industry and let the large companies just take over. It would be illegal it'd be like having, saying that beer is now legal, but only if you buy it from Miller, only if you buy it from Budweiser, if only you buy it from Molson. You're not allowed to have a microbrewery. You're not allowed to have, your own hops. Those are the things that you have to be careful that you haven't taken this paintbrush and said, everything's totally legal. Well, that's still not going to come around. That doesn't bring you the result you want. It's definitely the political scientists, that's their role.
Yeah, and I guess that it's a necessary role. I understand that, especially now. But it is amazing to me in 2020 that cannabis has become a political pawn. Believe it or not, because the one side of the aisle was attaching cannabis reform to the COVID aisle, and of course the other side, they were saying, well, there's more mentions of cannabis in here than there is jobs.
Yes.
And obviously one side got the idea that cannabis leads to jobs, and the other side just can't quite grasp that. That being said, if we do make the kind of changes that I hope we'll see in the next 48 hours. And, you know, it might take 4 months. It might take all 4 years. I have no idea. None of us seem to know what's going to happen in the next 4. It's like watching a sporting event because you really don't know who's going to win at the end.
You really don't know who's going to win. And there could be overtime.
Oh, no, we're pretty sure we're going to see some overtime. And Lord knows there'll be some video review, too, I think, of this as we get to go there. One of the biggest challenges is identifying the dose. And the dose for you may be different than the dose for me, which is different going to be than the dose for Alissa. And I'm talking about a combination of CBD and THC. You know, I certainly accept the fact that there is an entourage effect, that, you know, THC and CBD working together, they're there in that same plant for a purpose. And then extracting those chemicals and putting them into play into humans. Every human is different. We talk about the differences in the different metabolism and how we break down things. How are we ever going to have control of a dose and titration that will be accepted? Or will we never have that?
Oh, I think you will. And remembering that when you're taking a dose of any medicine, it's what you also already have in your stomach, or what you have for metabolism. And you also have different ingredients that would counteract each other. I mean, grapefruit and some of the other plants, other medicines is counteractive. But I will refer you to something that you might do every day, and maybe you don't, and that is drink coffee. Coffee is a natural planet in my day, but a plant, and it allows you to do everything that you are doing with cannabis. I use it all the time. You grind it, you extract it. So you could extract it with acetone, which is nail polish remover. You could extract it with isopropyl alcohol. You could extract it with alcohol itself. I mean, it does a great job. You lose the first 2 hours of the day, but you're active. And then you have all these other processes, but you chose either a cold brew or a hot brew. And even a cold brew versus a hot brew has 1,500 samples in it, compounds in it. A cold brew only has 1,000. And it doesn't go bad. Now, you take that same analogy over to a different variety. And one of the papers that I sent to Alissa was, there was a great work out of Germany and Italy that was done that allowed them to have different varieties, and they could separate the different varieties into the individual compounds. And then they could dip it in, let's say, a magic formula that looks for oxidation. And it would show the variety that was best for that. One that would show it for inflammation. And it would show the different variety that was best for that. And when we move towards that process, that allows you as a consumer or as a manufacturer to be able to take a variety and make it something that is more applicable for inflammation, another one more applicable for mood, another one more applicable for oxidation. So you have the chemistry out there is fine. We can figure it out once someone gives us a green light to go figure it out.
So wait, so you're saying right now you literally, gonna back up a tiny bit, like you can take this plant that you're growing and then test it to know exactly what it will be best to treat, like what condition it's gonna treat best?
The scientists would, yes.
Scientists would, yeah, not you. Yeah, I mean, yes.
Not you.
Maybe.
Maybe. No, not you. No.
But
No.
But it's different than so right now, if we're looking at a COA, we're looking at certain terpenes. So John was the one, and I repeated this story, the very basics that I can't believe I didn't know the first year I was in this industry, but Dr. Russo studied that terpenes are the driver. They're right, that they drive the effect.
They steer. As a bike, they're the front wheel.
Right.
Okay.
They steer the experience. The back wheel is the cannabinoids. That's the power.
Okay.
Generally.
That's a great analogy. Thank you for that.
Really good at analogies. That's how we communicate, because I don't understand a whole lot. And I don't want, we want to be able to then communicate this to people who are then, like a regular consumer or patient, because it is so hard.
Yes.
It's so aggravating when you're talking to people who still say, well, like cannabis in they use it in such a general way. And it's just so frustrating because, as one can make you, hyper and overactive, and one can make you fall asleep on the couch. And it's just, people don't
move and not want to move, even if you are awake.
Exactly. So, and then that comes down to, with your specialty, which is the extraction process.
Yes. So I like to call it concentration.
Okay.
And the reason I say concentration is because there's extraction, and that's a liquid or a liquid solid where you're coffee, and the separation doesn't have anything to do with a liquid. If you were to squeeze a cannabis plant, a fresh cannabis plant, it will squeeze out what they call rosin.
Mm-hmm.
And so you would take that out. That's not an extraction, that's a separation. You can take cannabis, put it in dry ice, shake it all apart, and all the trichomes fall off, all the nice, little brown, all clear balls, and that's the separation. But an extraction would be ethanol, heptane, hexane, CO2, propane, butane. So you're using a liquid to be able to solubilize it and then move it out, just as you're using water in your coffee. Now, there's a reason why you grind beans, Jimmy. There's a reason why you don't just take them out of the fridge and just throw a bunch of beans in there, do you? Well, no. Maybe you do. I shouldn't say that.
No, I don't.
So as a side note, I grew up with Bob LaBelle in my ear up in Burlington, Vermont, listening to him doing high school games. One of my favorite people. So anyhow, back to the subject.
Too.
Really?
By the way, I go back to 1978 with Bob LaBelle.
Oh.
I worked at Channel 4 in Boston when he first started there.
Oh, when he came down from Burlington. Wow,
Bob, I consider Bob a friend, and we've been to a lot of events together, let's just say.
Yeah. So when I went back through, I grind the coffee bean to give more mass. That's why you grind it. You grind it to increase your surface area.
Okay.
And when you grind it into a finer and finer, that becomes a different product, because now you have to use some pressure to do your espresso, right? But it's because your coffee is ground so fine that the water is not getting through. That's the exact same thing with cannabis. It is the exact same thing. You're not going to die, but you are going to enjoy it.
Now here's and I use caffeine all the time when I talk to parents or when it comes down to somebody who needs to learn a little bit about the product. You go a day without caffeine and you get yourself a headache. You go a day without cannabis, you don't really have any physical effect for the most part.
Correct.
How powerful an anecdotal story is that when you're trying to explain to people about the benefits of the plant versus something that we all take for granted? We take a cup of coffee every morning.
Caffeine is addictive. And so I used to have an abbreviation for the caffeine, and I've already forgotten it and stuff. So that's obviously I didn't do well with that one. But caffeine, opiates, those are because your brain now needs them. It now needs them. And when it doesn't have them, it's going back through going, I'm sorry, but I'm really missing this molecule. And you're not missing a cannabinoid unless you're using it for, if it's part of your endocannabinoid, just like we were talking about vitamin D or DHA, because you're low on those, you might need them to get you to a level, but you're not addicted to it. You might have a habit. Habits are different from addiction.
So I use the word optimized. So you would feel optimized maybe if your cannabinoid levels are a little higher, if they're lower. Okay. And you'll just function at a potential.
And eventually your body just takes over and says, I know what I'm doing now. I'm okay.
Sometimes.
Yeah, it will.
I want to ask Dr. MacKay, if you were the czar, if you had the FDA, the DEA, and the U.S. Department of Agriculture all in a room, and it was up to you to decide the amount of CBD in different products and who should be in charge of X and who should be in charge of Y, or THC or CBD in this case, how would you structure a regulatory government, I guess, for this new industry?
So I believe that a lot of the things that are outside of science become about money. And they become about, how do I squeeze as much cannabinoid out of that plant, and how do I squeeze even more money out of that plant? So part of it is, in the beginning, being able to have something that allows you to have tax dollars that supports what you're trying to do. So the state of Vermont They're now legalized it, right?
Yep.
And you could have them all in the same room. They don't have the money to be able to enforce the regulations they put in place. There are only 650,000 people there.
Right.
And most of them, don't have any interest in this. And so when you do that, if I had them in a room, then I would move towards first a phase 1, phase 2, phase 3. So it wouldn't be an all-in-one. It would be a czaration of my ideas. And so my czaration would be a phase 1 of making sure that we have things safe. That's my very first thing. Safe, safe, safe. Number 2 is efficacy. So now you move to efficacy would be what kind of boundaries would you have? In coffee, right? You have a boundary that people don't put 200 milligrams of caffeine into a product. And you don't have pure caffeine, you die from pure caffeine. And so now you have regulatory around that. You have boundaries and say, this boundary is for this. I would also do that. So now you ask me my opinion. Now I am czar. So when I go back through, I would say that I have to have this much of the cannabinoid in this product, and this is what it will do. And so when you have that boundary, you now have that. You also bring it through agriculture, I believe, in our schools. So Cornell and UC Davis and Colorado State, and you look at our I'm sure I've left out someone who's going, oh, but we're a good ag school. What happened to us? And so if you go back through, you look at that because they understand how to make a plant and how to make it safe and how to make it for something that we don't have. That doesn't mean that you have the other parts. The other thing I would do is limit the making of other compounds from it. There are compounds out there that they're making from they can make THC out of CBDA very easily. And you can make Delta 8 and you can make Delta 9 and there's other isomers. And that's where flumitamide, what you and I knew about in the early 50s with all the terrible birth defects, that's what the safety comes. We haven't tested all of the compounds that people are making. So you can catalog those. So my phase 1 is safety, and it includes those. Number 2 is efficacy. Number 3 is economics. You need to have it economically viable for companies to continue to provide good products for people, as well as the government, because in our government, we have to, fund the universities. So that's my czar relation, Jimmy.
I would totally vote for you for that role. The one thing everyone could probably agree on is that just makes sense. Everything you just said is scientific and it makes sense. And I'm so grateful because John's one of the people I go to when I'm looking at products, and it starts with extraction, but there are so many layers to it, and you kind of hit them all. So thank you for your.
I got one more new molecule, and it comes from our chat room. They want me to ask you about THCV. What is that? So
on one side of the molecule, there's I know that you love the chemistry, so I know how deeply you are into this one. So if you draw a hexagon and you draw that on one side of one of those little pointy things, there's 5 carbons. And when you have 3 carbons, that's THCV. So so you have one with 5 carbons, a little tail at the end, and the other one has a shorter tail. And so because of those, actually in Boston, Dr. Alexandros Makrionis over at BU has developed most of these things. He's one of my #1 experts in the entire world. And so when you look at that, he's found that the longer that carbon chain is, that from 3 to 5 to 7, the more bioavailable it comes into our body. It's easier for it to come into our body and has a very similar activity. So you have bioavailability, that's what can get into your body, and you have bioactivity, that's what it does when it gets in there. So that's what it is. And so it has very different things, different chemical characteristics as far as what it does versus THC.
There you go.
There you go. That's
that
your
was
chemistry
great.
lesson.
And that's the kind of thing we love to do here is we get some questions on chat and we throw them out there and we get some feedback and everybody goes home happy. And it is that engagement process that we are trying to bring to the public so that we can continue to educate them about this plant and the benefits of it and how it works both internally and externally. So Dr. John MacKay, you have been awesome. And by the way, Alissa has my number. If you ever want to talk sports, I got no problem spending some time on the phone with you talking about sports.
I appreciate that. And I appreciate that the LA winning the Boston Red Sox Annex team, as I call it now. So
yeah, that's right. Because of Mookie. That's right. Because of Mookie. Hey, look, it's been a strange year in so many ways, and sports is just another, microcosm of what's going on in the world anyway.
Yeah.
So it's been fascinating. And of course, tonight, that other guy that left town recently,
the other
number
guy.
12. Yeah.
Oh, I thought you were talking about the big guy that catches the ball, not him.
No, I'm talking about Tom Brady, not Gronk. They'll both be in action tonight. We'll watch it and feel sick if you're a Patriots fan. But anyway.
Wait, well, if the Giants upset them again, I can't handle that.
That is not going to happen. I'm going to tell you that right now, sir.
Yeah, we said that in the last Super Bowl, too.
I did not say that in the last time we played them. But anyway, that's okay. Hey, great talking with you. Really appreciate it.
Cheers.
And how about where can we find more about Dr. John MacKay? I know you're all over the internet. I Googled you and you come up like a million times.
You have a lecture that people can check out. Is that correct? If you want a little more education on extraction.
Yeah, you just go to I guess again the LinkedIn, but I have like 5 or 6 videos out there, and I do live classes on extraction, which are just 5 hours of this, really.
Well, sir, I'll tell you, it's entertaining, and I'm fascinated with the whole subject matter and everything. And if I ever do have time to do that, I'll take good notes, I promise. But again,
okay, thank you.
Thank you so much. And you got to realize one more thing, John. For years I interviewed all the same people Bob Lobel did, and now the both of us are talking to scientists and doctors. I think it's pretty funny. In so many ways, but great to talk with you. And anytime I can mention, pick up the phone and call Bob just to bring him up to date. I got an excuse now, so thank you for that, and I look forward to hearing from you again.
All right, bye.
Bye, good seeing you.
All right, and we're going to have more Cannabis Chat after we're going to have a little lesson here from our friends at cannabis.net, and we're also going to tease you with what's coming up at the end of this show, because I interviewed a woman by the name of Ashley Elsner from a new product called Artery Pay. It's a Venmo for cannabis. So you'll hear that on In the Weeds after Cannabis Chat. But for now, we're going to take a break, come back with our last interview. Don't go away.
Hi, everyone. Welcome to a very special edition of In the Weeds with Jimmy Young. And today we have a very special guest. Her name is Ashley Elsner, and she's coming to us from the other coast because we start our programming here on the East Coast. She's on the West Coast, but her journey to the West Coast is very interesting. It's a great story. And she has a new company that she's bringing to market that I am fascinated by because even in the elevator pitch alone, I understand that Artery Pay is a Venmo for cannabis. Ashley, thank you so much for coming on the show, and tell us about Artery Pay and how you came up with this idea.
Well, Jimmy, thank you.
Me, as she most of the time is on our Medicinal Monday show here, but now we're joined by Rob Dhoble, and he is in Pennsylvania right now. Rob, tell us a little bit about what you do at Havas, because that's where you are, correct?
Yeah, I'm at. I've been at Havas for a little over a year. I was fortunate that I was able to be brought in to lead a new business called simply Havas ECS, where the ECS stands for Endocannabinoid Science. So offices in New York and New Jersey supporting clients that are either prescription cannabinoid, medical cannabis, or what we call non-prescription cannabis, like hemp, products like that.
There you go. And Alissa speaks very highly of you as well. It's one of the things I get to do. Whenever I need something about CBD, I go to Alissa, and then Alissa opens up the door to like dozens of these educated people from the medicinal space that is so fascinating to me. How remarkable is it how much we've learned about this plant and how much more we have to learn about this plant?
It's that's probably a nice kickoff tee up for. We're still all students, right?
Right.
Even the brightest of us is bright in a particular area, whether that area is medicine, extraction, growing and cultivation, or even biosynthesis more and more, where it's not even grown, but it's manufactured. There's more that we don't know, probably. I know that the literature says cannabinoids, there's about 100 to 200 clinically worthwhile ones. We only talk about 2 or 3. So if that's the tip of the iceberg, I think it's kind of laid out that way.
So if the 2 biggest ones are the THC and the CBD, which is I think what you're alluding to, and I definitely passed that test. What are some of the other ones that are out there that perhaps show a lot of promise? And I know Alissa has been talking to me about, is it CBN or is it CBDA, Alissa?
A little both. I mean, CBG, there's a handful of them. And I think CBDA was the first one I gave you a sample of to try. And that's the raw form of basically the best way to describe it. But I mean, I think where Rob and I come, especially into this, is from such a different perspective, like a raw form, like we came from the pharmaceutical industry. That's kind of what got us chatting, I believe. And it is a completely different universe. Like I don't know if you want to expand upon that, Rob, but we're both trying to speak to physicians about this, and it's challenging when you're talking about a raw form versus decarb. It's just a different language that we're speaking. So
Jimmy, to your question up front and to what Alissa just said, the education of physicians, nurses, pharmacists, physicians' assistants is much more advanced in every other area except this, right? That's not because of our laws necessarily, but it's because of our educational system. And if the pharmaceutical industry is excellent at doing anything, it's about how to market their products appropriately based upon the pre-existing training of those physicians. That pre-existing training is to use the scientific method as opposed to kind of raw agriculture to kind of figure things out, as an example. But unless there's a teaching and a learning and a certification to this space, doctors aren't going to participate because it's uncomfortable. It's downright scary if it's still Schedule 1. I could lose my license maybe. But more importantly, if I didn't learn it in medical school, I'm taught to either refer that person to somebody who's maybe more expert in that, or if it's a complete nonsense, try to shut it down. And if I didn't learn it in medical school and nobody's come to me with any real professional kind of 2020 caliber education on the topic, I'm probably right to dismiss cannabis as a fringe science. The issue is that it's not a fringe science. And the fact that it's growing and growing and growing to now over 30 conditions where there's legitimate clinical evidence that'll stand up in a courtroom, in a boardroom, and in an exam room. Some doctors are privy to that information in states that allow such a freer practice of medicine. Most aren't. And at Havas CCS, as Alissa knows, we set our sights on filling that education gap. So our first project was for us, and it was a service to clients, and that is a CME program that helps a physician, nurse, or pharmacist go from novice to really conversational expert, not just on cannabis, because keep in mind, cannabis is the treatment. What's the condition? The condition is the endocannabinoid system related condition that they weren't taught about in medical school. So there's a whole bunch of promise. We know a lot less than we will know. But before we go much further, we need to let the doctors catch up. Because if we're treating ourselves, well, I don't do that with my car. So, why would I do that with my body? So that's where the science and the medicine in my mind, especially for serious conditions, it requires adjustment of medications that I might be taking. Am I going to do that on my own? But at the same time, do I know of a doctor trained in this area that can understand cannabis and old-fashioned medicine all in the same? And that's what people struggle with, especially parents of children or people caretaking people with serious conditions where cannabis may be beneficial. When you talk to them, their biggest, I don't know if it's their biggest, financially is probably the biggest, but their first challenge is finding a doctor that will either talk to them, and then if they will talk to them, actually help them. And thanks to social media, I know of 5 or 6 in the nation that make it their full practice of helping people like that. Unfortunately, that's the vast minority of physicians out there.
We're starting to see more universities embrace the science behind the cannabis plant to be part of their curriculum. Is at least accepting that there is plenty of places to study this plant. Is that the first step to perhaps getting it into the curriculum of the medical schools, and then having a new generation of doctors and nurses that are coming out of the medical community or into the medical community? Are they going to start being the trailblazers in this new frontier?
What do you think, Alissa?
I don't even know how to call. This industry never ceases to amaze me. I don't predict. I'm trying to evolve with it. I don't know.
One of the new ones, if you look at the courses that are in schools, just overall for medical, pharmacy, life sciences, like the Cornell Integrative Plant Sciences program, there are an enormous number of courses and programs that teach a craft or a distillation, or there's a craft approach to the entire education system, but it leaves the medical schools really out.
Yeah.
One of the challenges with cannabis for most doctors is that cannabis is not a pharmaceutical, with the exception of 3 products, maybe 4 soon in our country. But they're not prescription products. And if they're not prescription products, And they're actually not even OTC products because they're not nutritional supplements per the law. Well, how does a doctor dose them? How does a doctor prescribe a particular formulation? Mm-hmm. So the precision of medicine requires something more than just cannabis. And I think what we're seeing state by state is the emergence of products that are unique formulations, including, and no laughter please, suppositories. Why? As I've been taught, there's a whole science to suppositories giving relatively fast and long sustained relief for certain conditions, without going through a first pass oral metabolism. And it's also precision dosing. You know exactly how much when it went in and so forth. So that is what's appealing to physicians. So if they get a response, they know how to titrate and adjust from it. And if the formulation itself is not a dosable, titratable form, what are we even talking about? We're talking about self-care again. And the doctor says, I don't want anything to do with that. So we're fortunate that we're working with a few clients now that are developing cannabis formulations, not as FDA approved drugs, but as pharmaceutical quality formulations that have data. Mm-hmm. Maybe the data is bioavailability data. So the doctor knows, oh, to get this much in, I'll try this much and we'll see how it goes. Some companies are actually doing the clinical trials, and that's not so cheap and that's not so easy. But they're really betting that their unique formulations will solve medical needs that the prescription drugs just don't solve yet. And that's really promising to see the emergence of brands where it's not just about cachet and remembering and loyalty, but brands that I heard about from my doctor, my nurse, or my pharmacist.
So I know how I go about, I guess I feel like I found some of those brands, but it's you have to search pretty hard to find one that topically might actually deliver. Well, we've talked back and forth a little bit about, I go back and forth myself on delivery systems. And I think that the pharmaceutical industry, 40% of patients have a hard time swallowing a pill. That was something I never learned a lot about that. That was never much of a pushback, I guess, when I called on physicians. But I do think there's a large need, like some of these tinctures. You and I have talked about this a little bit. Like I wanted to stay in that dependability of a capsule or what we know of as a pharmaceutical, but there's such a need. So when you bring up suppository, I totally agree. As weird as that sounds in the beginning, I've learned about that a bit in the hormonal space, and that's like a very big thing. It just works better. It's cheaper. It's easier, and doesn't transfer as easily if you.
And you don't have to worry, did I hold it under my tongue long enough or did I swallow it?
Yeah.
Right?
Yes, so, exactly.
But what I'm to maybe connect some of the questions, Jimmy, is nobody walks into a liquor store and buys alcohol unless you're in college and you're buying grain alcohol, maybe for a punch. You go in there with a specific purpose. And I only use that not because medicinal cannabis is like alcohol, but the industries are set up dispensary wise almost the exact same way. And the emergence of brands that appeal to the customer for self-care and mutually, because they're dosable, titratable, non-smokable, child resistant, there's a list. You're seeing the emergence of a formulary where, mark my words, people will be hearing about brands like Moxie. Well, what's Moxie? Moxie's a brand of very precision grown and formulated cannabis that's available throughout dispensaries in Pennsylvania. It's grown in a special place in Pittsburgh. People don't know it as from McKeesport. They know it as Moxie. And it comes in different forms that are dosable and titratable. And they're not a client of ours. That's why I'm freely expressing this. But nobody smokes cigarettes either. They smoke a particular brand, not in favor of that. Nobody eats food, they buy particular products. So cannabis is turning that corner. As the doctors start participating, they just want to know the 2 or 3 brands available in their local area that they can reliably recommend by dose and by dosing frequency. So that's not a huge ask, but that's the practical steps that I think we're headed towards. A formulary of products that, don't want to say Moxie again, there's a lot of other brands, but the Xerox phase is about to kick in.
I know, I could not be more on the same page, because it's like, as soon as you get the buy-in, I've got to be honest, like I've been hesitant to recommend products to even to family and friends, because it's like, I personally believe there are more bad products out there than good ones, and that we're buying from the marketing people and not the scientists. We're just not buying from who we should be. And I think such great potential. I have to ask you a question with obviously the election coming up and all of the possibilities. What do you see happening as it relates to deregulation or potential deregulation?
Well, with a lot of the civil unrest focused on expungement, I think both parties, regardless of who wins the election, both platforms have talked about the benefits of cannabis-related convictions being expunged. Why? Lots of reasons, including discriminatory policing and things that I've heard both parties really take ownership of. The one difference in the platforms, and it's hard to know where the Republican platform is, because there really wasn't one this year. It was a little different. But the Democratic platform, based upon what Bernie Sanders and Joe Biden agreed when Joe got Bernie's endorsement, they agreed that cannabis would be rescheduled, not descheduled. And what rescheduled really is code word for is 50 state medical cannabis. Well, if there's 50 state medical cannabis, what's going to happen next? Well, that same platform says nothing's going to happen next. The states will decide on recreational. And just like they control their own liquor control boards, let the states control that. But when it comes to federal, there's enough evidence now to say that it shouldn't be Schedule 1 that says there's no medicinal value. It should be something less than that, a Schedule 2 or a Schedule 3 perhaps. I've heard people talk about either. The kicker is, when it's Schedule 2 or Schedule 3, it's real medicine now. And if it's real medicine, the question is, well, how come my insurance won't pay for this?
Right.
And the workers' comp insurance in 6 states already says you are paying for this, especially if it's chronic pain versus opioids. So I don't know where it's headed, but the rescheduling will allow cannabis to be used as an intervention that's reimbursed, probably starting first where the goal is to do less harm as opposed to the most good, because that's the way medicine is kind of practiced, right?
Mm-hmm.
So rescheduling to Schedule 2 or 3, within 2 or 3 months, lawsuits demanding, why doesn't insurance pay for my cannabis? It pays for my Schedule 2 or 3 sleeping aid. Why isn't it paying for my cannabis that's legally prescribed here in my state? And without the ability to hide behind or justify Schedule 1 as a reason not to reimburse, it's going to be challenging for insurance companies to deny much longer, especially if there's real evidence for particular formulation. So again, nobody wants to reimburse for cannabis. It's how do you dose it?
Right.
What strain is it? Just like preparation, H is a preparation, a formulation. Those type of products that meet specific medical needs. That's where the world's going. And I think the rescheduling, not descheduling, and people hear those words so differently, but rescheduling just means medical cannabis 50 states.
That's interesting.
And probably without cards. unless you have a recreational need. Who knows? When it's not a Schedule 1 issue, and keep in mind, DEA dogs for the last 2 years have not been trained on cannabis smelling,
right,
and sniffing. They're assigned to schools right now. They're not retired yet, but that tells you where things are going.
And do you think we can catch doctors up and, help to, we'll look to you, I guess, because we have a lot of work to do to catch up physicians who might be using this. That's the thing.
They're way behind.
Yeah.
On March 1st in France, cannabis becomes medical cannabis program kicks off with reimbursement, following 2 years head start by Germany. It's part of medicine. And if you don't want to participate, that's okay, but you better know enough to refer somebody, unless you're going to keep prescribing products that somebody else may think are more unsafe than the cannabis.
Do you see, for the most part, a lot of people who have been introduced to the medicinal side of cannabis turn to it almost as a last resort? They've exhausted a lot of the options available to them through their own medical doctors, and then it's like, we got nothing else to lose here, let's try the cannabis thing. What will it take to get to the point where the doctors are going to say, we want to look at this as a first option, not a last option?
If we're talking in the United States, we're probably talking about issues relating to malpractice, issues relating to tort and liability, right? You could say the medical system runs fine in America. It runs on fear and greed. But that kind of not joke aside, what you have is you have a system that is paying for things that if there was a full medical review, might pay for things in a reverse order of safety and effectiveness. What does that mean? So as a medication of last resort in 6 states, by either legislature or court judgment, workers' comp insurers must pay for medical cannabis for the treatment of chronic pain, if it was indicated and legal. Not as a medication of first resort, but as a medication of last resort. And I think that while that may tug at our heartstrings and say, why is that? We have to realize that it's being put up against other things that are proven FDA-approved medication.
Yeah.
So it's actually kind of in a junior league status to begin with. So for that reason alone, a conservative physician says, well, of course, I would exhaust the prescription-approved therapies. Where that changes is when the harm reduction question comes into play. And that, in the case of chronic pain and opioids, is why those 6 states, and maybe a few more, force the insurance companies to pay. Some of the insurance companies would prefer to pay for cannabis, and that may happen soon. Why? Well, if I'm an insurer and I'm paying for somebody's hip or knee surgery, and the data from IQVIA says that up to 12% of those patients, orthopedic soft tissue surgery patients, if they take opioids for more than 5 days, there's a greater than 50% chance they'll be taking those opiates a year from then. Medically acquired addiction to opiates is a real issue. And shorter courses of opiates combined with cannabidiol, shorter course opiate prescriptions or lower dose as well, combined with medical cannabis. You only have to search the internet a little bit to see that those have been proven in some patients to be effective. So harm reduction is, I think, where the courts it's going to go. Havas did a symposium, sponsored a symposium along with Everyday Health, Cannabis BPO, Basilite Health Systems at Columbia University last year. And we did a mock trial where there was a doctor on trial. The doctor was on trial for just following the law, prescribing Percocet, even though the patient was saying, "Doctor, I need something more. I'm even drinking now to kill the pain. I need something else. I can't just, can you please increase my dose? Doctor wouldn't do that. Doctor also wouldn't refer the patient to a medical cannabis specialist. Patient gets into a car accident, kills people. So the court case is now against the doctor for malpractice. And when it went to a vote, the equivalent of the jury, which were doctors in the audience, a full 1/3 of the audience members thought that the doctor practiced below the minimum standard of care by not at least referring that patient for cannabis evaluation. So the doctor, 66%, wins the case, but that was last year. There's even more evidence this. So I think a lot of this in America is going to be battled out in the courtroom, where the focus isn't going to be on the greatness of cannabis and its clinical potential. It'll be more focused on where can cannabis mitigate risk and harm reduction caused by other medicines that are legal and reimbursed.
Wow. And that's why I always say, people ask me about investing in cannabis space. I go, find a good law firm to invest in, because they're going to make it no matter what happens, right? That's the way it works. Rob Dhoble from Havas, I really appreciate you taking some time today and joining Alissa and myself on this show. And if people want to find out about Havas, that's the website to go to, right?
If you go to havasecs.com, you'll learn about our educational offerings and reimbursement strategies, in particular for medicinal cannabis, prescription cannabinoids, and hemp-based products.
There you go, havasecs.com. Rob Dhoble, thank you so much for joining us again. And Lord knows, buckle up your seatbelt for the next 48 hours. It's going to be a wild ride, I think, and appreciate you taking the time.
Thank you both.
Thank you so much.
Thank
Bye-bye.
you.
Yeah.
Well, Alissa, we did it again. We got through another show. I really appreciate you taking the time yourself, and I learned so much. I got like 4 sheets of notes now.
I know, that was an overwhelming group, like my head's spinning a little bit, right?
No, but that's the whole point. I mean,
Exciting though. It's like you know something.
It's fascinating. I tell you, I've never met so many intelligent people in my life about this, and I love the fact that they even recognize that they don't know it all. They just want to get a chance to learn more and the effects of what this plant does on others. So we're in a whole new world of weed, aren't we, Alissa?
We are.
All right. That's Alissa Merrill from flowerandtonic.com. I'm Jimmy Young from Pro Cannabis Media. For everybody here on the Cannabis Chat team and PCM, thanks for watching. Thanks for listening.
Hi, everyone. Welcome to a very special edition of In the Weeds with Jimmy Young. And today we have a very special guest. Her name is Ashley Elsner, and she's coming to us from the other coast because we start our programming here on the East Coast. She's on the West Coast, but her journey to the West Coast is very interesting. It's a great story. And she has a new company that she's bringing to market that I am fascinated by, because even in the elevator pitch alone, I understand that Artery Pay is a Venmo for cannabis. Ashley, thank you so much for coming on the show, and tell us about Artery Pay and how you came up with this idea.
Well, Jimmy, thank you so much for having me on In the Weeds. You know, honestly, like, it's such a great show. I really appreciate what you're doing over on the East Coast in order to spread the word about cannabis and the cannabis industry, and actually the professionalism that people are trying to bring to the industry, as well as, you know, really wonderful medicine for people who are, you know, really need it. So Artery Pay is exactly what you said. It's Venmo for cannabis. So it's completely legal payment processing that is done via ACH, so no card processing. You just frankly link your bank account just like you would with any digital wallet, and you're good to go, and you can pay for cannabis right there.
And yeah, no, you said the word legal, so I'm going to actually give you another kudo here, because you are you graduated law school, right?
I did, yes.
Yeah.
I got my JD MBA from Northwestern Law and Kellogg School of Management. Those are out in Chicago and Evanston. Shout out to my Wildcats.
I'm friendly. I like Northwestern. I have dear friends there, and in fact, one of my I don't want to call him a protege, but certainly someone who's a friend of the family, someone who came through my on-camera training, won a college Emmy Award from Northwestern University, and is now
an amazing journalism program. They're absolutely wonderful.
Yes, they do. And now he's in Hollywood looking to create his own show, and we might even be airing it. But that's another story. But you also did some undergrad work and got an undergrad degree from some school in Connecticut that is kind of like Harvard, but it's not, right?
That's right. That's right. I am a Yaley. I'm an Eli. I'm Bulldog. Woof woof.
And I mean, you've had a ton of schooling, so obviously you have a pretty good background on what it takes to actually bring a product to market and a service to market in this particular case, and also a product. But as you know, in the cannabis industry, there's all sorts of regulations. And you mentioned that you must have gone through a legal discovery process on how best to do this. Yes?
That's right. So actually, my background is financial law and financial institution operations. I started with Sidley Austin doing financial regulatory work. That was actually right out of Yale. And then I was at Bessemer Venture Partners doing legal and operations. One of my co-founders has decided to join me now. This is Keanu. Is this corporate culture?
I understand. And we understand the importance of having camaraderie and a pet camaraderie during this difficult time when everybody's meeting on Zoom and doing business on Zoom. And it's a total virtual normal that we're getting used to now, I guess, right?
Yeah, he loves to bomb my interviews. Actually, it was very funny. I was on the phone with a potential investor last night, and their kids started jumping on the couch behind them, and they of course quickly turned it off. And I was actually sitting there giggling because it's kind of refreshing and nice to see people in their own element and in a more personal space rather than professional. We keep everything professional. We're very very of course we're engaged with one another, but it's very matter of fact, very to the point, and you don't necessarily see people's humanity. And I actually kind of have enjoyed some of the Zoom conferencing as a result of that, because you get to see people's humanity come out.
Well, there you go. And just for the record, for our audience, our first meeting was not on Zoom. It was actually the old-fashioned way on a phone call, right?
Old-fashioned phone call, good old-fashioned high touch.
And we met through our mutual friends from the Emerald Media Group too, and I want to give them a big shout out too.
Tina and Jill, yeah, wonderful ladies.
They do a great job, and we're about to take their productions to a whole new level, and I think they're very excited about the partnership that we're forming. But let's go back to the product. Let's go back to fighting that stigma that is out there and all the legalese that you had to uncover and discover in order to create this great Venmo for cannabis.
Mm-hmm. So my background really being financial law, financial regulation, really being very comfortable with the state-based approach to regulation, and that really being where I kind of cut my teeth was in state-based financial law. That being where I cut my teeth, this was actually not very complicated for me. So when I looked through the legislation, realistically, you can provide legal banking, legal financial products to this space, but it's very complicated because fintech, when it comes down to it, is technology-enabled finance. It is finance. It is not tech. There are rules, there are regulations that are in place, and you have to follow them in order to actually be able to provide the services that you want. And when you start talking with banks about these things, they have a longer discovery. When you're asking them to do a new product, they have to go through a pretty substantial risk management exercise in seeing how it is that they're going to be able to do that and see whether it's actually operationally possible based on their current capabilities to be able to support this space. And one of the things that we actually found was that on the compliance side, while it's perfectly legal to provide it in a certain way, to provide products in a certain way, you can't cross state lines. You have to be really careful about the onboarding process because you have to do enhanced due diligence on all of the businesses and all of the customers. And then when you get to the actual transactions, there's additional financial reporting that's required. So when you start talking about regulations with FinCEN, as well as Cole Memo, which while rescinded by the Department of Justice, has continued to give a framework for what banks view as important criteria for making sure that their operations are run legitimately. And it's a pretty good framework, actually, if you start thinking about it. So, but the other thing about it is you have to report every single transaction to FinCEN as a suspicious activity. And that's a huge overload on a compliance team that is doing most of these processes on a manual basis. And so we actually went ahead and built a lot of that into our transaction system so that you have the compliance side and the transaction unified. And so when we were taking these to banks to actually talk with them about our process, they not only loved the wallet and loved that we were showing proof that we were in fact doing things legitimately, which, you know, fintech has gotten a pretty bad reputation since, you know, all of the what do you call it, initial coin offering, you know, illegal securities behavior, you know, people running off with other people's money and pretending like they were actually raising funds when really they were just kind of fraudsters, cooking of books that happened with Wirecard. I mean, like there's been a whole lot of mess that's come through the fintech community, and, you know, rightfully so. You know, banks are concerned about that liability in addition to, like, how do you manage the risk of these fintechers in addition to the risk of cannabis? And so we were able to actually prove that process out, show them like we are doing exactly what we're supposed to be doing. And actually when they saw that product, they were like, can we have that? So it's true that we've been called Verifin on steroids in our back office, but frankly, that was really just built for me so that I could effectively, efficiently, and at scale be able to manage our compliance obligations for, you know, running a completely compliant cannabis banking / payments program. We don't specifically do the banking. We actually would prefer for people to have their own bank. It's better for them because you should always know where your funds are custodied. But with the way that we have set this up, we are following money transmitter law. So in all the states where we're required to have our money transmitter laws, we're going to have them before we do operations because that's how we do. And then with respect to our team, you know, we're actually financial professionals for the most part. We all have very personal cannabis stories. Mine is very personal. I am a cannabis patient. That's actually how I got into the cannabis industry, is I saw all of the crazy things that were going on in financial space for the cannabis industry and was genuinely concerned that it was going to derail the legalization process. Because frankly, you have protection at the state level for your cannabis business, yes, but you don't have protection if it turns out that your financial providers were either money laundering or committing financial fraud or bank fraud or different types of, frankly, financial fraud in order to access a system that they have not gotten clearance from the gatekeepers of that system, from the folks who own it, that they're willing to work with cannabis and take on that risk. So we have been completely upfront. We have been completely transparent. Our financial relationships, actually, we're transparent about those as well. We have a public partnership with Radius Bank, a nice Massachusetts institution that's very fintech forward. Very smart people. We're very excited about that. And we're able to provide our services really with a federally chartered financial institution backing our product, providing the processing services and providing the custody of those assets. So you know where your funds are.
Right. And that's fantastic. And of course, in this day and age, everything's done, you know, everybody walks around with this little handheld computer and connects with the world. And that's what we all do, right? It's how it works.
It's easy. It makes your life so much easier. And you know, this is also contactless in a space where actually your cards really aren't.
Right.
I mean, when you're going in and you're pressing buttons on these things, or you're like, how dirty do those ATMs look? How dirty do the processing equipment for card processing look? It's they've always been gross, frankly.
Well, we've all become a country of germaphobes, and for a reason, and we all understand that reason. But there are some certain extents that many of us go to. And yes, I wash my hands pretty much every time I use my ATM card or any other card. And I also pump gas with a glove on for the first time in my life too. And actually, I really appreciate that, because I hated the smell when you got the gas on your fingers and all that. It was just, I don't need to go there. You mentioned something.
Keanu decided he had to come back and make another cameo.
Well, as long as Keanu doesn't, have to go out or anything in the middle of the interview, I'm comfortable with that. And
he wants to talk to you, Jimmy. He's excited to meet you.
Well, I'm no Dr. Doolittle, but I do have that ability to chat with other animals, and I certainly, as a talk show host, by the way, I pretty much talk to anybody, including Keanu. Oh, you're so cute. Does Keanu speak? Does Keanu speak? We don't need him. I was going to say that's fine too.
He's the strong silent type.
I wouldn't be familiar with that one. Let's just say I'm the weak, loud type, and I like to run. Anyway, I want to talk to you a little bit about something you mentioned. You mentioned the Cole memo. And I'm very familiar with the Cole memo because I literally just wrote a blog about the challenges in the cannabis space, in the social media space, because we too have been subject to censorship by Facebook and by YouTube for 2 pieces of content that we've put out there. And actually everybody keeps telling me, only 2? You're doing pretty well, right? But it was the fact that Cole memo got rescinded and gave Jeff Sessions, like, hey, we're going to take down those local cannabis companies in those legal states, kind of showing his federal, whatever it was, moxie, whatever you want to call it. There's a few other things I could call it, but I'm going to leave that alone for now. But the bottom line is it freaked a lot of businesses out that were taking money from the cannabis space. And it was specifically the banking. And it was no coincidence that YouTube, 4 months after that memo was released or rescinded, if you will, YouTube took down all the money-making cannabis programming and content that they had. They were afraid of it. They took it all down. No notice. And by the way, it happened to coincide with the first podcast that I was looking to put out onto YouTube, and I was told not to, so I didn't. But it is an amazing thing to me to hear about artificial intelligence is making decisions on content based on certain words. And, and those words aren't alcohol or opioids. They are cannabis and marijuana. And I mean, that's a plant, isn't it? And this is the thing that freaks me out about this whole thing. It's still scheduled as a Schedule 1 as a drug. It's treated as a drug because that's what, for 80 years of propaganda, everybody told you it was. It's a medicinal plant more than anything else, and it's been around longer than any of our laws. And this is the facts that are coming to the surface now. And while you have an anecdotal story, and I'm going to ask you about that to tell us your cannabis story in a minute, it still bugs me as someone who is trying to do the right thing and educate the public about this plant and look at the various science and research that is now supporting this green wave that continues to move. It's frustrating, though. It really is. We're still at the very beginning, so we really do have this obligation of telling the stories of those that are in the cannabis industry. And that's why I started this company, and that's why I enjoy meeting people like yourself and others similarly minded people who understand. And I also see in this industry, everybody is very passionate about this cause. And I think that does go to your reasons. Tell us a little bit about what happened to you and how you ended up using cannabis instead of, I'm going to guess, painkillers.
Well, yes, that's true. So I have a condition called complex regional pain syndrome type 2. It is a very, very nasty neuropathic type of pain. It is peripherally located for me. It's in my left leg. It is as a result of an injury that I sustained when I was 23. I ended up with compartment syndrome. I nearly died. It was a very long road to hoe, and it both disabled me in my left leg, gave me substantial weakness. I had a lot of muscle death, in my lower leg. I had to have a host of surgeries to be able to walk again. I am incredibly grateful for where I am now, and it's true that cannabis changed my life. I had been living with this condition and barely getting by for, a very long time, and they tried all kinds of medications. They tried all kinds of treatments for me. Went so far as to have neurosurgical releases, some of which were successful, some of which were not. I tried just about everything. And finally, my father is a neurologist, and he told me, he sat me down and he said, Ashley, why haven't you tried cannabis? The studies aren't just promising, the metadata is actually conclusive that it works for neuropathic pain. So you should try cannabis. And the truth is, I had never even thought about it. Again, I am a Southerner. It's not that I have anything against it. Don't care, frankly. I'm sort of a libertarian. Anything you do in private is your own business, as long as it's no harm to other people. So right. I didn't care whether other people did it or not, but I was one of those like, well, I don't take Advil for headaches. Why would I take weed for pain? Why would I engage in weed at all? Right. It's an illegal drug, blah, 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 blah.
Right.
And I, honestly, I was like, what have I got to lose? What have I got to lose? I've been dealing with this for over a decade, and, I have not had any real relief, and it's impacted my life so severely, that I, what have I got to lose? And so I tried it. And after 11 years, I was pain-free for the first time.
And it took you 11 years to get there. It wasn't one of those magical stories that you rubbed on some magic potion and the pain went away. There was a...
But it did. Yeah. I mean, that was what was magical about it. Like, right. I can dose once every 24 hours, and actually it gives me enough pain relieving benefit that it's been a complete game changer for me. It has made my life so much better.
Wow.
And, it was a very challenging time for me. And that's a very personal story. And it became very clear to me, yes, there's been a lot of awful propaganda against the use of this plant. It was completely dataless. Right. It was fear mongering. And, the good news is that we do have channels now to actually get that information out to people in a way that they can easily digest. That, hey, and almost everybody that I know in the cannabis industry has some similar story, like they use it for post-traumatic stress disorder, or it doesn't work for me on that one, but honestly, just the ability to sleep again, right. For all of the other medications that I had been on, which all of them have side effects that are just really difficult to cope with, from gastrointestinal issues to exhaustion to insomnia. I mean, they take a real toll on your health. And actually, with cannabis, I was able to reduce some of those. I was able to come off some of them. Some of them I'll be on forever, and that's just kind of how that goes. But, I was able to even change regimens by using cannabis to help me with the withdrawal symptoms that you do have from regular medications.
Right.
These totally legal sources. And yes, I mean, of course, I was on opioids for a number of years there and took myself off of them because, frankly, they don't work for pain. They just knock you out.
Right. That's a lot of people say that exact same thing, and I've heard that story, not specifically about that compartment pain that you've had to go through, but whatever the ailment is, and they end up on opioids, and especially in the sports world, lots of athletes have gone through this, and that's why you're seeing a lot of athletes, ex-athletes, that are in the cannabis space, because they recognize that this can help, and they'd much rather use THC-based plant material than take a Percocet or a Vicodin or whatever the team doctor wants them to take. Now, I do want to go back to Dr. Dad here, the neurologist, right? Because I want to make sure I heard this right. It was a medical doctor and also your father, a neurologist, and also your father who said, what the hell's the matter with my daughter? Why don't you take some weed to help with your pain? I think that's a great story. And by the way, very rare, as you know, in the medical community.
He's my father. He saw me struggling. He knew that this was something that could help. Now, it's true that the studies that were coming out at the time that he told me about it, and he was reading about them in his continuing medical education, and that's actually where he came up with the idea for it, because it's not the kind of thing that I think on the East Coast the doctors have been conditioned to look for drug-seeking behavior in a way that makes them concerned about being able to provide this. But the other thing about it is actually the DEA threatens to take away, well, there is the underlying threat that they could take away your prescriber's license if you do recommend it. So if a patient comes to you and says, can I use cannabis for this? You know, the doctors typically tell you yes, and actually it's a good idea, but they cannot tell you to use it. Now, my father, of course, is not my doctor. Sometimes he thinks he is.
That's right.
But he had followed my condition, and, you know, frankly, he had been instrumental to trying to get me adequate treatment, just seeing how impactful it had been on my life and how much it had altered the trajectory of my life. I mean, this happened when I was 23. I had to pay off medical debt before I could go to law school. You know, like this is, it's been very impactful. And, you know, in some ways I'm grateful for it because I have a wonderful job and a wonderful opportunity to help the world in a way that is instrumental to making sure that legalization goes through and that people can have access to this. Because frankly, without financial infrastructure, no business is capable of surviving. No business.
Thank you for
those businesses. That, I mean, you're not going to get these medications.
Right. Thank you for reminding me about that too, by the way, because I certainly understand that. And, you know, we too suffered the closing of a business account by a bank.
Sorry about that. It happens.
Well, no, it's so funny. I don't know if you're familiar with Kushko. Nick Kovacevic is the CEO of this company. It's a publicly traded company. And he and I did this interview, and it was a great interview. And it is available, by the way, on all the PCM social media outlets. But we talked about having the banks shut down your account. And of course, you know, it happened to me once. It happened in Nick's company 6 times. And I said, oh, you God, you make me feel so much better. But I felt like I broke my cannabis business cherry by having my bank shut me down, right? Because it's like, hey, you're a cannabis business. We can't do business with you. And off you go to the credit union world, which is where I am, and they offer plenty of services. And now that I know about Venmo for cannabis, I mean, you know, this makes it so much better on so many fronts. I do want to go back to your 2 partners, because I know there are other people on your team. Tell me a little bit about them and how you guys all came together to create this product.
Sure thing. So I'm going to start with Phil because he was the first addition to my team. He's our Chief Technology Officer.
He has a last name. What's it?
Blazer.
Thank you.
I'm sorry about that.
No, that's all right. I know that happens a lot because you're friend. You know, you have that relationship.
That's exactly right. I'll be like, Phil, and they'll be like, Dr. Phil, and I'll be like, no.
Phil Glazer. I get it. Yep. Yeah. Okay.
And he's wonderful. You know, he's a seasoned engineer. He was an old school IBMer, you know, was doing contracts for the Department of Defense and the FBI during the 80s. And, you know, he's an incredible technical talent. He heads our technical team there. He, you know, designed systems for Bank of America and Wells Fargo. So like he knows how the banking systems, the internal IT infrastructure is set up. And then he's also, you know, very passionate about fintech and about, you know, moving things forward in terms of the infrastructure that is available to financial institutions, which is another place that I'm very passionate about as well. Because actually our infrastructure in the United States with respect to our financial infrastructure is obsolete. It is obsolete. I mean, you've seen the rest of the world actually already shift over to other systems, and the systems in the United States are still COBOL-based. And that's a type of coding language that actually isn't even taught anymore. It's not. And those engineers are retiring, so they have nobody to even service the systems that are like over 50 years old. You know, that's an infrastructure that basically has a limited lifespan, wasn't really particularly scalable. I mean, at the time, of course, it felt very scalable because everything felt really cool, you know, when we started doing infrastructural transaction systems. But now when you take a look at them, they're not forward looking. And, our team has been able to skate to where the puck's going to be, in addition to backward integrating into US banking. So we have been very, very smart about the way that we have approached that. And actually, as a result of that, we are we are finalists for awards with Benzinga on their FinTech Award program.
Nice.
For, let's see, Best Payments App and Best Use of Blockchain.
Wow, there you go.
And we're not a cryptocurrency.
Not a cryptocurrency, that's good, and I appreciate that. But I do, look, first of all, you made a great sports analogy. Second of all, explain blockchain to those who may not be familiar with how it works.
Okay, so blockchain is a mechanism of transmitting data. So it's really a coding and encryption function. So blockchain is a wonderful technology for a lot of things, but in particular, when you start talking about tracking infrastructure, and what you're able to do with that is it's decentralized in some cases, it's not decentralized in others. So you can have it be, infinitely scalable through the decentralization process, or you can also keep it pretty tightly focused with a centralized process. And I'll explain a difference there. So for example, Bitcoin is decentralized in it's very concentrated. People who are familiar with cryptocurrencies will know what I'm talking about. But Bitcoin has, centralized processing, but it's still decentralized. Whereas, for example, Hyperledger. Hyperledger is a company that actually provides, ledger-based systems, but it's still encrypted in a way that is very, very difficult to break into. And it's impossible actually to change after the fact. So one of the things that's really nice about blockchain is that when you bring in the encryption and you bring in the no alterations post-transaction, if the data that is going into the system is taken directly from the source data, like for example, at the source of the transaction, like what we're doing, then basically you have a perfect record of what occurred. An immutable record. So like the days of cooking books are over, kind of thing.
Well, that's good. And also, you mentioned about cobalt-based coding and how our systems are obsolete. I'm guessing that the cybersecurity has to be so intense that you feel very comfortable creating something like this, right? I mean, we're
a financial institution.
Yeah,
we're not skirting the rules on that either. Frankly, we have been SOC tested, penetration tested. We have policies for breaches. We are hoping that we never have them, but we go through high levels of encryption at any sort of place where we might have vulnerabilities. And that is not easy to do. We're doing our best, but we are trying to use financial institution level encryption and security processes, which are really required by law.
Right.
They're required. And it's something that, if you have any sort of a software-based system, you should be paying attention to your cybersecurity because everything can be hacked.
Right.
Everything can be.
And usually not by people from this country, I might add.
No. Well, infrequently. It happens, though. I mean, you take a look at the kid from Florida that ended up hacking everybody's Twitter accounts, like all of these famous people's Twitter accounts, right. And trying to get people to send him Bitcoin. I mean, that was kind of, it happens. That is my point. My point is that it happens even in this country. There's a lot of very talented folks out there who don't have enough to do, and so they mess around on computers and figure out ways to break into your systems. And they are very, very talented, unfortunately.
There you go.
So blockchain is a nice way to try to hedge against that. But I mean, the other thing about it that's really nice, because it's a record-keeping mechanism that basically makes it almost impossible to have corporate governance issues. And that's something that people should also pay attention to, because you want to know that the companies that you're working with are on the up and up, that they're operating legitimately, and that they're not doing anything that's going to, make it so that whatever they're providing isn't sustainable. And frankly, you've got cannabis that's regulated, you've got finance that's regulated. So that's like a hyper level of regulation. Like it's a lot. And so you have to manage both sides of that. And, encryption helps you make sure that everything is on the up and up. Blockchain encryption protects you. Blockchain, the way that coding is done, helps protect you against somebody, not fully disclosing everying.
Gotcha.
And it's encrypted, so you still have to have the keys to be able to get access to that data.
Mm-hmm.
It's not just like posted on the internet, but the fact is you can actually go back and review that, and nobody can change the records. So when you start talking about auditability, when you start talking about transparency, you can't do much better right now than blockchain-based systems. I mean, they're fantastic.
Fantastic.
Okay,
Well, that's good.
I want to talk about my CEO.
That's the next one. I know. I knew who you had. Go ahead. Tell me about your CEO. What's his full name?
Stephen Gonzalez, and
okay.
He's absolutely brilliant. Just a wonderful guy. He's actually originally from the South Bronx projects. He's New Yorican. He's Puerto Rican, from New York.
I know a few people from the South Bronx. What a shock, right? I mean, we all know people from the South Bronx. Go ahead. And there's some of them really cool people.
He's a wonderful person. He grew up in the South Bronx in the 70s and 80s. And, a lot of his people were running from the popo.
Yep.
Over possession charges,
Right.
And, he saw a number of his neighbors actually go to prison for distribution of cannabis. And they're kids, they're young men, they're, 14, 20, like these are kids, and their lives are being completely thrown away in that way. And so this is a very personal story for him as well. I'll let him tell you the full story another time, but, frankly, he has had to deal with the brunt of a lot of this stuff. Like his community has had to deal with the brunt of a lot of the war on drugs, and frankly, the opportunity to take care of this and make sure that legalization went through. Because again, you don't get you're not going to get a hall pass for money laundering or financial fraud. That's it.
Right.
It goes to national security, so they can't do that. It's not like cannabis where you can get a state hall pass.
Right.
from
That's
the
a great
federal
analogy.
prohibition.
Right.
Doesn't work that way. These are genuine federal crimes that go to national security and go to protecting our country, to counter, basically trying to counteract terrorist financing. I mean, it's really important stuff. So you can't expect a hall pass on that. You won't get one.
Right.
But so he grew up in that environment, and he was really smart, was identified as a good candidate to get a minority scholarship to Exeter. And so it changed his life, and he went to Exeter, he went to Trinity College in Connecticut.
NESCAC. NESCAC,
Yeah.
New England Small College Athletic Conference, Tufts University, my alma mater. I always give them a plug when I can. And Trinity's cool too. I played against Trinity. Oh my God. Anyway, keep going. It was a long freaking time ago, okay?
Yeah. And he's got an MBA from USC. Again, he was part of, and I forget the name of the program, but it's another one that identifies minority talent, and actually had, he had scholarships the whole way. This is a guy with an incredible story, an incredible backstory, and has seen the upfront and personal. He has seen the impact of the war on drugs, and he's just a wonderful guy. Yeah. Just a really great guy and really smart. He did investment banking for a number of years, and after that, he became like the 8th employee, first adult in the room, chief operating officer, chief financial officer of this really cool, at the time, startup, Deviant Art, which is user generated content. For example, comic book art. Yep. So how do you monetize comic book art? When you're an artist, you're a graphic artist, people are interested in your designs. This was one of the first marketplaces and one of the most well-known marketplaces to be able to pick up independent art from graphic artists. And for them to be able to monetize that and be able to actually sell that to the public. And so really, really fantastic organization. They were purchased by Wix.com a few years ago. Mm-hmm. And at that time, Steve started looking for a new project, got interested in this space. And actually, he and I met at a conference where I was speaking on the challenges of banking cannabis, on how to do it legally, and what you really needed to watch out for, because I'm very action oriented. I'm not going to give you the well, it depends answer. I'm going to give you this is the safest way to do this kind of answer. And I was working on my project, which was how do you bring the compliance and the transaction together, unify that so that it's not such a cost burden. He was working on the user interface side of the digital wallet to make it really, really attractive and very engaging for consumers, and something that could be a really a fun app for cannabis users to actually also generate content, be able to talk with one another about these things in a safe space that was not going to necessarily, it's artery pay, it's not cannabis pay, right. This is not going to out people, because people can be very private about their health issues. Right. I was actually, until I engaged in this project and realized that, I needed to actually be forthcoming about my own condition and things like that, and how this has helped me, because people just need to know. And so,
does that help you? I'm going to guess that has given you a center of confidence and a much more better feeling about just who you are and what you've gone through. You're more comfortable with it now, right?
Yes. I mean, actually talking about these things helps you go through them.
Yes, they do.
And it's hard because, yes, there's always going to be people who are going to judge you. That's going to happen. Yes. But you just kind of have to move past it and live your best life and be who you are. And frankly, I don't actually have anything to hide. I mean, other than the fact that I use cannabis for pain management, I'm so uninteresting.
No, I tell you what, you've been extremely interesting, and I've enjoyed chatting with you. How does it make money? Are you taking a percentage on every transaction? Is that how it's working?
This is free to the customer. So the customer is not being charged anything. It's just like Venmo in that way. For the merchants, yes, we are taking a percentage of the transaction, but we're using normal Square rates. Like we're not doing high risk rates. I have some opinions about high risk rates. I think that they actually incentivize people to hide what they're doing. And so we wanted to be, helpful and upfront and sustainable. And, these are small businesses. They're not able to afford 6 to 12% on the transaction processing fee. So we're looking at like a 2.9% and 30 cents, something like that, 3%, somewhere in that range.
Okay. And are we ready to go? Are you ready to bring this to market? Where are you in the stage of a startup world?
Yes. So actually our partnerships are in place. We are launching some pilot programs that are coming in Massachusetts with some of the dispensaries there. I cannot tell you exactly who they are right now, but there is one in the Rockwood area that we are talking with. There is one that has a store in Orange and a store in oh my goodness.
Well, we can do the math and do the...
I've forgotten the name of it, but it has a couple of stores. Yep. So you will be able to try out Artery Pay very soon. We believe that those programs are going to be launching in the next couple of weeks, probably before Thanksgiving.
Fantastic.
Also, if you guys want to come and talk to me, I'm actually going to be at the NCIA Cannavest thing that's going to be happening. They're doing a cyber summit. Right. I'm speaking on cannabis payments and banking. Well, speaking, they recorded it. They recorded it a little bit early for me, so you'll see me be a little bit, this is funny. I'm a little bit less on point. Okay. I had one cup of coffee, but was also, had not had my second, so it was a little bit early for me.
Now, that drug, caffeine, is a drug, and we're talking about a plant. Right. And I always use that example when I talk to parents of kids and cannabis, that's illegal. That you're going to end up going to different things and you're going to be, homeless before you know it. And I'm like, it's a plant.
I hope they recognize that I'm not homeless.
You're not homeless. And as a matter of fact, they're starting to realize there are actually a lot of very successful, smart people who have used it their whole lives to enhance their lives. It's about responsibility.
My people, but like, frankly, a lot of lawyers use cannabis. And frankly, the ones that use alcohol tend to lose their relationships, and the ones that use cannabis are actually able to be functioning human beings outside of work.
Wow, what a novel approach. I love that.
It's very funny. It's something that you encountered a lot. And, you know, it's a good thing. It's helpful, especially for people who need to, like, for example, for sleep.
Right.
I think
100%.
One of the big problems for, parents, for example, is that they don't get enough sleep, right? Mm-hmm. And when you do sleep, it's fitful, because like there's noises going, and so you're always exhausted. And what's really fantastic to me is that indica strains can help you shut your brain off, and even short sleeps become more productive so that you wake up rested.
Right.
You wake up feeling better and ready to go the next day.
Yeah.
So I have found it to be incredibly helpful to interrupt that I'm worrying about not sleeping. Okay, I'm not sleeping, so I'm going to be in more pain tomorrow. Oh, now I've thought about my pain, so now I am in more pain because I'm not sleeping and I'm getting myself agitated.
Yeah.
So for me, I think that even just sleeping helps to interrupt that pain cycle,
right?
Which just spirals.
Right.
It just spirals.
And sleep, your body and your brain heal when it's relaxed and sleeping. So all that's cool. All right. Hey, look, we've got to wrap this up. Look, Ashley, you and I could probably talk for another hour. You know that, right? And we have one more cameo by your dog, perhaps. Is Kino there? Where is he? Keanu, where is he? Keanu, where is he? There he is. Okay. All right, so anyway, Ashley, the company is ArteryPay, arterypay.com. It's there. Yes. You can certainly see Ashley and her two partners there, and it explains what it's all about, and there is a contact button as well. But I just want to thank you again and wish you guys the best of luck. I expect we will be talking with you again. And also, I just want to say thank you for taking the time to listen to my story too, because a lot of people like to tune that out sometimes, and I appreciate the fact you're a good listener too. So thank you for that.
Thank you so much for your time, Jimmy. I really enjoyed it. This has been wonderful, and we're very excited to support In the Weeds, and really enjoyed being on your podcast. Thank you so much.
Well, thank you, Ashley Elsner from arterypay.com. Remember, it's a whole new world of weed out there. I'm Jimmy Young from In the Weeds and the founder of Pro Cannabis Media. Thanks for watching. Thanks for listening. Weed Talk Now, Weed Talk News, and In the Weeds are all available on most major podcast distributors like iTunes, Spotify, Google Play, and our friends at clnsmedia.com and our flagship, cannabis.net. So subscribe, share, and like our videos on all the social media networks out there, including LinkedIn, Twitter, Instagram, Facebook, the WeedTube, and YouTube. Weed Talk and In the Weeds are two productions of Pro Cannabis Media supported by Revolutionary Clinics, one of the top medical cannabis dispensaries in the Massachusetts area, now with 3 locations in Greater Boston, 2 in Cambridge, and 1 on Broadway in Somerville. Rev Clinics has a patient-first mission. They will customize your needs as a medical patient with the proper titration and combination of strains, flavors, and products. Rev Clinics, where the patient comes first.
We are Pro Cannabis Media.